Hey everyone, welcome to this full course video on Ethical Hacker by Simplilearn. In this full course, you will learn all about how to become an ethical hacker. This video will help you get acquainted with the duties and career prospects of an ethical hacker along with various ethical hacking concepts. Here, we will learn who is a certified ethical hacker, the skills and duties of an ethical hacker, career of an ethical hacker, following which we will give you an insight into the popular CEH version 11 certification. Moving ahead, we will look into the types of hackers and then dive deep into ethical hacking concepts and learn the process of ethical hacking. We will also go through a hands-on demo on the various types of cyber attacks like phishing, SQL injection, and so on. Next, we will acquaint you with the various ethical hacking certifications available today and the best books you can learn from for ethical hacking. Our experienced instructor Bipin and I will take you through this full course and guide you on your journey as an ethical hacker. You can learn all of these topics in under 5 hours. So let's begin. We will start this full course with an interesting short video on ethical hacking. But before we begin, make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell icon to never miss an update from Simplilearn.
You might have heard of several cyber attack cases where companies have lost their crucial data, money, reputation, and customer trust. These attacks are carried out by hackers who exploit weaknesses in a computer network to gain unauthorized access to vital information. However, hacking is not always bad, as there are hackers who work with different motives. White hat hackers, also known as ethical hackers, hack with permission to defend an organization. This form of hacking is legal. It is known as ethical hacking. Ethical hacking is distributed into 6 different phases. The first phase is reconnaissance, where you collect all the required information. Next is the scanning phase, where you try to spot any system vulnerability. Following this is the gaining access phase, where the spotted vulnerabilities are exploited. In the next stage, known as maintaining access, you try to maintain your access for future attacks by installing backdoors. The 5th phase is clearing tracks, where you clear all the evidence of the hack, and finally, in the reporting phase, you document the summary of the entire attack. There is and there will always be high demand for ethical hackers who can safeguard organizations from cyber attacks. So what are you waiting for? Get certified with Simplilearn and become an ethical hacker and put an end to the cyber attacks in the world.
Now let's begin with who is a certified ethical hacker. A certified ethical hacker is a person who's also known as an ethical hacker. An ethical hacker is just the opposite of an hacker. A hacker is a person who with malicious intent tries to misuse vulnerabilities that they have identified in an organization structure and then gain access to unauthorized data. Whereas an ethical hacker does the same thing. They try to locate the weakness, they try to locate the vulnerabilities, and they see how they can be misused. However, the intent is completely different. And that is what differentiates a hacker from an ethical hacker. Hacker would be a criminal with a malicious intent who would try to misuse and personally gain by doing criminal activity from that particular activity that they have done. Whereas an ethical hacker would try to help the organization in an authorized manner. So that's where the permission comes into the picture. The ethical hacker has permission from the organization to conduct some activity that would identify vulnerabilities or weaknesses in the information technology structure of that organization. And then once they have been identified, the ethical hacker would then help the organization to plug those vulnerabilities rather than misuse those vulnerabilities. So any person who completes CEH version 10 certification is known as a certified ethical hacker. So this is a certification. Once you complete that, once you pass the exams, you can essentially call yourself as a certified ethical hacker, and you're going to get a certificate with the same terminology. So as you can see in the diagram, your responsibility would be as a certified ethical hacker would be with the proper permission of the organization. With the authorization coming in, with contracts coming in, you would legally help the organization to identify those weaknesses and vulnerabilities. And once you find them, you're going to report them to the organization, and you're going to help the organization with remediation plan, which would help them remediate, mitigate, and resolve the vulnerabilities that you have identified, thus making the organization's security structure a lot better, based on which black hat hackers or malicious hackers would be unable to attack the organization. So what is CEH version 10? Now this course was initially introduced in September 2015, and I think if you look at the versioning, this is the 10th version that is there in the market. So essentially CEH, or the Certified Ethical Hacking course, as the course itself, has been for a long time in the industry. It's a very well accepted course and it's a well-renowned course. The current version as it is was introduced in September 2015 and is one of the toughest certifications in the cybersecurity field. This includes a lot of information that you have to learn, that you have to know before you can attempt the certification. You will master all ethical hacking methodologies that are used in penetration testing and ethical hacking situations. What does that mean? That means that CEH version 10 is a structured course that will help you look at all the phases that are used in ethical hacking, all the terminologies that are utilized, all the tools that are utilized in such a manner that you can penetration test or a vulnerability assessment and identify and test the vulnerabilities for their complexity. And this course, once you complete the course, you would have mastered all the ethical hacking techniques that are required. There are two exams. One is a written exam and the other is a practical exam. Now you can opt for either or. The written exam is basically a multiple choice question exam where they'll ask you scenario based questions and you have to answer those questions. That is something that we're going to look into during this video. The practical exam is basically a simulation exam where they give you a scenario and you have to complete those tests and prove that you are a good ethical hacker. Based on the report that you give, if the report tallies to what the test was, you would be clearing that exam. So practical exam is a little bit tougher. It's more hands-on. It tests the actual skills that you would perform in a hacking scenario or an ethical hacking scenario. Thus the practical exam going to be that much tougher. The written exam, to give it credence, tests you a lot on your mentality, on your thought process, on your judgment characteristics. So they will give you a scenario and ask you what do you think is happening, what does this attack tantamount to, or would be what would be the next step in the particular attack that they're describing. Thus it's more of an intellectual test where when your thought processes are being checked and you are giving those exams. So what would be the difference between these exams? In a practical exam, you would be conducting all those steps yourself and you would be reaching a conclusion. So here essentially you're being tested on the skills that you have developed on the execution part of it and to see whether you can execute a test end to end. Whereas in a written exam, you would be put in the middle of a test where you have to assume something, where you have to understand what the steps would have been performed in the previous steps and what would be the expected result, and you're supposed to analyze that and then come to the correct answer. So if there is a question which exam is better, written or practical, the answer to that is from an intellectual perspective, a written exam would be a lot tougher than a practical exam, and from an execution perspective, a practical exam would be tougher than a written exam. So it depends on us which exam we want to give. Both of them are widely accepted and well respected in the information security field. So it's just the option that we choose which exam we want to give. Now this course, the version 10 course, is purely attack based course. Okay, it is an offensive course. There is no defensive mechanisms. So if you're looking for questions of how to secure yourself on the internet, how to securely configure an operating system, or how to securely configure a server, how to configure a firewall, this is not the certification. This basically talks about attacking those devices. So if you come across a firewall, how would you test a firewall? How would you identify vulnerabilities in those? And how would you bypass a firewall? Similarly, if you come across a server, how are you going to attack and hack the server? Let it be Windows or Linux based. So this basically becomes an attack based course. You're looking at offensive mechanisms over here and not defensive ones at all. So what's new in this version? In this version, there's a new module for IoT, Internet of Things. It focuses on emerging attacks, vectors like cloud, artificial intelligence, and machine learning. It basically talks about smart devices. And it talks about the vulnerabilities, the risks that the smart devices face in today's world. For example, it will tell you about the industries that are utilizing all these smart devices, why are they utilizing it for, what kind of devices they are utilizing, and what are the risks within those devices. It will also give you a lot of tools for you to practice upon to identify such IoT devices. What would constitute an IoT or an Internet of Things device? Any device which has an IP address and can connect to the internet and create data. So even your smartwatch, your smartphone, your cars that have internet connectivity nowadays, your Google Homes, Amazon Alexas, all of these devices would come under the IoT umbrella. And have you ever wondered about sitting at home, having a Wi-Fi, having all of these devices, even a smart TV if you will, connected to the Wi-Fi, and have you ever questioned how a hacker would then be able to access your home through all of these devices, record information, and basically just spy on you? Similarly, an organization where they are utilizing IoT, they would be vulnerable for the same vulnerabilities. And this course does include IoT security to a certain extent, where we talk about vulnerabilities and how to identify those vulnerabilities in IoT. Then there's a new vulnerability analysis module where it gives you risk assessment. It talks about CVSS scoring systems. It talks about how to do a vulnerability management program in the first place. What are the steps required in a vulnerability management program? How should it be repeatable and how it should be measurable as a program? And what should be the outcome? So basically, it will give you a structured way of how to do a vulnerability management assessment and how do you want to achieve the end goal, thus leading you to a penetration test. So all the modules are leveled up. What do you mean by leveled up? That means they've been updated to the latest tools, latest standards, latest technologies. So you've got cryptographic attacks, you have got attacks on applications like SQL injection, we'll be talking about packet sniffing using various tools. All of these are upgraded, which means they are up to the latest operating system. So even when we do this course, you'll be looking at operating systems like Windows 10, Windows 8, Windows Server 2012, Windows Server 2016, Kali Linux machines, Android machines, and Ubuntu desktop as well. So all of the operating systems are latest, the tools are latest, and you will be interacting with these tools. And then there's a mobile security toolkit as well, which will help you do a penetration test on a mobile device. So these are what is new in version 10. Now let's talk about the roles and responsibilities that an ethical hacker should have when they actually go into the world. Now, what are the responsibilities, roles, what are the capabilities that we should have? That we should be able to look at scripts that would test for vulnerabilities. So for example, a SQL injection attack, it's a script-based attack. Let's say a cross-site scripting attack, that is again going to be a script-based attack. So we maybe we want to go ahead a little bit, look at Windows systems and do a PowerShell attack and know about PowerShell scripting a little bit. If you look at Linux Windows, there's a bash shell where there is bash scripting and you'll want to learn that scripting as well. Now the course doesn't include all these scripting languages. It does help you understand what these scripting languages are, and it does have some basic introduction to how these languages can be utilized to create those scripts. Then we also want to develop tools to increase security. You want to look at those commands that are utilized on all operating systems. You want to look at the capabilities of the operating systems, of how to create security parameters and ensure the operating systems and applications devices are secure. You should be able to perform risk assessment. Now, when you say risk assessment is the likelihood of an attack being actually executed on an organization based on the threats and the vulnerabilities that we have identified. So risk assessment is something that you find out a vulnerability and then you try to figure out in a hypothetical manner of what is the likelihood of that vulnerability being exploited by a hacker if they find that vulnerability. And if they do execute that, what is the impact that is going to happen on the organization, and what is the penalties or the repercussions that the organization is going to face if that vulnerability is exploited. That's what a risk assessment is. Then we should also be able to develop security policies or set up security policies and implement them to ensure that the security mechanisms are standardized and are consistent. And then we should also look at training staff for network security to ensure that they are aware of these vulnerabilities and they know what their responsibilities are to maintain some semblance of security in the organization. So why do we want to become a certified ethical hacker? Now, since you're watching this video, it's easy to assume that we all are interested in security, we all are interested in hacking, but hacking is not a real job. For us to get a job in the industry on a security parameter or information security parameter, we want to become a certified ethical hacker. So if you look at the popular hacking cases that have happened, in 1990s, there was a national crackdown on criminals. Microsoft NT operating system was hacked. Now this was back in the 90s when security wasn't that much evolved. And there were a lot of attacks back then that crippled infrastructure, that crippled banks when they started realizing that computing isn't as easy as it seems. Of course, if you use a computer, the functionality is always there, but if the functionality is not properly configured, you're just exposing yourself to cyber criminals where they're going to steal information and your organization may just go bankrupt because of that. In 2013, an example, Adobe reported 2.9 million accounts as stolen. In 2016, Kaspersky, which is an internet security firm, announced that there were 758 million malicious attacks that occurred worldwide. Imagine that, 758 million malicious attacks that were identified and reported. In 2018, Facebook reported a loss of 30 million to accounts that were stolen. 2018 again, Quora reported 100 million customer accounts being stolen. And in 2018 again, Marriott, 500 million travelers' accounts stolen and manipulated. Now, when you say accounts were stolen, how does it affect the organizations? Now, first and foremost, if those accounts were stolen, that means usernames and passwords were cracked, and those accounts may have contained credit card information or may have contained some personal information that would identify the person and thus make them gullible for a social engineering attack or an identity theft attack. So it has a cascading effect. If I would have been affected, or you would have been affected with these attacks, the repercussions would have been catastrophic. Your credit card information being stolen, that means somebody else would have misused it, and you would have seen a huge bill come your way. Now, you can go back to the bank and dispute that, but that's again a dispute that you're trying to have with the bank for something that you didn't do, which requires a lot of energy and a lot of time. And at the end of it, somebody has to pay for that particular loss. Now, in this scenario, the bank would have had to bear the loss, but then that's a loss for the bank, and bank doesn't want to do that. And that's where they would try to hire certified ethical hackers who would try to test these vulnerabilities and plug them in so that the end consumer is also secured, the bank is also secured, right? In this case, Marriott, there were 500 million travelers' accounts that were stolen. A lot of credit card information was leaked out. Email accounts were hacked and compromised, and thus there was a lot of repercussion that happened. Now, the thing is that there are also laws that these organizations need to adhere to that tell the organizations how to keep their information secure, and also have penalties in place if the organization gets hacked. And the penalties are pretty severe. So organizations do not want to get hacked or do not want to get compromised, not only from the customer's perspective, where they would be losing customers, losing reputations, and then thus facing losses, but also from a legislative perspective, where they would have to pay fines to the government for the frauds that have happened. So these are some of the popular hacking cases that have cost these organizations quite a lot of money, and thus they have a lot of security in mind. If you look at the news, in BBC News, there was something reported from a French police that there was a virus that infected more than 850,000 computers worldwide. Now, on the similar lines, if you remember ransomwares, and if you look at WannaCry that happened in 2018 or 2017, it also cost the world $4 billion in losses during that just one small month of its infection. Then Google basically disclosed that a large-scale hacking effort was targeted at Apple devices. And this has been, it has reported that there was a sustained effort to hack iPhones over a period of at least 2 years, which means that there's a specific target towards Apple consumers, and they are at a higher risk of getting hacked than others. Then the Texas government organizations hit by ransomware attack. So hackers have infected 23 organizations connected to local government in the US state of Texas with ransomware. That means that their databases have been encrypted. The government themselves do not have access to that database. The databases could have been compromised by the hackers. And that means that whatever services were being provided to the users based on that database may no longer be available to the end users because of the ransomware. Now, moving on with these, why do we want to become a certified ethical hacker? Increased attacks lead to more job openings. Now, if you look at ransomware, the WannaCry attack that happened in 2017, there was a knee-jerk reaction given by the rest of the world for IT security. Suddenly budgets started opening up. Suddenly people wanted more ethical hackers on their payrolls to test for vulnerabilities. In UK and Europe, we have GDPR, which is again another law that imposes severe penalties on organizations that get hacked and for not having proper security and a vulnerability assessment and penetration testing program in place. So that leads to a lot of job requirements as well, where organizations look at people with this special skill set to help them mitigate the vulnerabilities, to safeguard them and their customers from hackers, and also from penalties from law enforcement and governments. So thus the demand keeps on increasing for ethical hackers, which automatically means that the salaries are going to increase as well. So more the demand, lesser the supply, higher the salaries. That's plain economics. Then challenge hacker with malicious intent. So from an ethical hacker's perspective, it is our duty to safeguard an organization, which means that we'll be pitched against hackers, and we have to ensure that those hackers would be challenged to the maximum limit before they even try to get access to any of the resources that we are trying to protect. It offers a boost in your career, so more efforts that you put in, more vulnerabilities that you find, the better the career prospects that you have, and the better job aspects that you're going to get. And this also lets you keep yourself updated on the latest technology. As the technology progresses, as we evolve on technology, security will also evolve, and the ethical hacker would need to keep themselves updated on these technologies. So this is what is a plus point to become a certified ethical hacker.
With the increase in the number of cybercrimes across the globe, there is also an increase in the number of cybersecurity jobs, and the role of an ethical hacker tops the list. Hi guys, this is Shruti from Simplilearn, and today I will run you through this video on ethical hacking career. So let's get started and explore the world of ethical hacking. Let's begin with a few facts. Did you know that by the year 2021, there will be 3.5 million cybersecurity job openings? That is a huge number, isn't it? And also, according to the US Bureau of Labor Statistics, there will be 28% increase in the number of jobs from 2016 to 2026 for information security analysts, which includes ethical hackers. This proves that there is a great demand for ethical hackers at the moment. As I mentioned earlier, the number of cybercrimes across the world will increase as the digital era will only continue to grow. Organizations will be on the lookout to hire professionals who can fight these cybercrimes and protect the company's data. And to fight these cybercrimes, we will require individuals who can think like a hacker. And who is that? Well, to do this job, we have ethical hackers. As you might be knowing, an ethical hacker is trained to discover system vulnerabilities. An ethical hacker is also known as a white hat hacker. He or she is given authorization from the company to perform security assessments. And at the end, an ethical hacker would have to report the findings back to the company so that the vulnerabilities can be fixed. An ethical hacker performs these security assessments with the help of various hacking techniques and tools. Let's now move on to our next topic, that is the steps to become an ethical hacker. You might wonder how to start your ethical hacking career, right? Well, I will take you through that step by step. Firstly, the candidate must have a computer science or an information technology bachelor's degree. It is also possible to become an ethical hacker without these degrees, but provided you have the required skill sets and experience. The next requirement to be an ethical hacker is that the candidate must have a minimum of 2 years of experience in the information security field. You have to start your career with a software or a networking job, and only then can you move on to the ethical hacking field. You have to start your career with a software or a networking job, and only then can you move into the ethical hacking field. Coming to the certifications, it is necessary for the candidate to hold various cybersecurity certifications. Certifications play a vital role in the field of cybersecurity. Your job opportunities can solely depend on these certifications. To become an ethical hacker, you can start off with the foundational level certifications such as the CCNA and CompTIA Security Plus certifications. Finally, the last step to become an ethical hacker is to clear the Certified Ethical Hacker examination. CH certification is provided by the EC Council. It trains the candidate to protect a company's network by using the same tools and methods that a hacker would use. The CH exam will have a duration of 4 hours with 125 number of questions. If the candidate clears this exam, then he or she will become a certified ethical hacker. Now that you know the steps to become an ethical hacker, let's look into the skill sets which are required to help you achieve these steps. First and foremost, an ethical hacker needs to have an in-depth knowledge of the working of the operating systems. Knowledge of Windows, Linux, and Macintosh operating systems is required. For penetration testing, creating exploits, and bug hunting, programming will be important. So knowledge of programming languages such as C, C++, HTML, Python, and PHP will be very helpful. Basic knowledge of networking, TCP/IP protocols, and OSI model is necessary as networking is the foundation of cybersecurity. For securing databases, knowledge of SQL, NoSQL, PostgreSQL is necessary. Cryptography is used to secure information. It is the process of converting data from a readable format to a non-readable format and vice versa. Cryptanalysis is decryption without a secret key. In most cases, certified ethical hacker would need to perform cryptanalysis. Hence, ethical hacker has to be comfortable with cryptography and cryptanalysis. Ethical hackers should be proficient in network security control measures such as intrusion detection and intrusion prevention techniques. Now let's move on to the responsibilities which are taken care of by an ethical hacker. Let's have a look at these responsibilities. An ethical hacker is responsible for scanning systems, open and closed ports using tools like Nessus and Nmap. Vulnerabilities and threats are identified by doing this. In addition to scanning for vulnerabilities, they also search the deep corners of the network to spot critical information such as passwords, which can make the organization vulnerable to an attack. In addition to building and maintaining IDS, IPS, and firewalls, they also try to evade these security measures to gauge the performance of the systems. A lot of times, a company's online fraud or online theft incidents are looked into by an ethical hacker. An ethical hacker also checks for sniffing networks and hijacked web servers and applications. Those were the responsibilities of an ethical hacker. Now let's look into the various job roles an ethical hacker can apply for. It is a misconception that an ethical hacker will perform only penetration testing. Well, there are a number of other jobs an ethical hacker can apply for. The different job roles such as that of a penetration tester, information security analyst, security consultant, and an information security manager. Let's have a look at each of these job roles one by one. A penetration tester performs the typical responsibility of an ethical hacker. That is, he or she tries to exploit a security system's vulnerabilities. This is carried out using different hacking tools and techniques. An ethical hacker can also apply for the role of an information security analyst. There is a difference between the job roles of a penetration tester and that of an information security analyst. Here, the candidate will be required to primarily design and protect the organization's network from various cyber attacks. Finally, the candidate is also required to document the identified security breaches so that it can be omitted the next time. The responsibilities of a security consultant is more or less similar to that of an information security analyst that we saw previously. As a security consultant, you will be responsible to design, implement, and maintain various security architectures. In addition to this, you're also required to upgrade the security systems as and when required. Finally, an ethical hacker can also apply to the role of an information security manager. As the name suggests, this role will require the candidate to possess managerial skills, as an information security manager is responsible to head the IT and the information security team. Now that we have seen the responsibilities, the skills, and the steps to become an ethical hacker, let's have a look at the different companies hiring ethical hackers. To name a few, we have Bank of America, Ernst & Young, KPMG, Urban Pro, and IBM. Let's now look into the salary structure of an ethical hacker. Well, in India, the average annual salary of a certified ethical hacker is nearly 4,76,000 rupees. And in the US, the average annual salary of a certified ethical hacker is $91,000. Now I will guide you through a sample resume of a penetration tester. As you can see on your screens, this is a sample resume of a penetration tester. We will look into this resume closely and understand how your resume should look like if you are applying for the role of a penetration tester. As always, you can start off with your name and your email ID and your phone number, followed by a brief summary of your current job profile. It is preferred to add your LinkedIn profile link here and also your GitHub profile link if you have one. As I mentioned earlier, this is a sample resume for a penetration tester, and hence we have to have more than 2 years of experience in the information security field. As you can see under the experience section, the candidate has 2 prior experiences, out of which the first experience is that of a software tester and second is that of a penetration tester. You would have to mention your latest or current experience at the beginning. You can mention your job role and the company and the duration, under which you can list out the various responsibilities that you are looking into currently. If you are a penetration tester, you can mention responsibilities such as security monitoring, black box testing, documentation of the results, vulnerability scanning, and so on. Below this, you can mention your first company's experience with the roles and responsibilities that you have performed earlier. Here, the candidate was a software tester before becoming a penetration tester. Let's move on to the education section. Here, the candidate holds a bachelor's degree in computer science. You can mention your degree followed by the university name. Or if you're applying for any other role in the cybersecurity domain, it is recommended that you list out the certifications as well. To start off with, a CCNA certification will be preferred, followed by a certified ethical hacker certification, which is a must if you are applying for the role of a penetration tester. In addition to it, the Certified Expert Penetration Tester certification will also hold a great advantage. After mentioning the certifications, you can go ahead and mention your skill sets. Here we have the technical skills and non-technical skills. Under technical skills, you can mention the programming languages that you know. Here we have C, C++, Java, Perl. You can also mention the operating systems that you have worked on. For example, Windows, Linux, Unix. And in addition to the programming languages and the OS, you can also mention the tools that you know, such as Nmap, Metasploit tools, which will be helpful if you are applying for the role of a penetration tester. Then you can also mention encryption technologies, knowledge of SQL, and bug tracking systems if you have worked on them before. If you have participated in ecodathons, you can mention that here as well. Under the non-technical skills, you can mention various competitions that you have taken part in and the games that you like and other extracurricular activities. Finally, you can also mention the projects undertaken. Under the projects undertaken, you can talk about the various projects that you have performed in your company or outside the company. Here, we have two projects, one as a software test engineer and second one as a penetration tester. So this is how a resume of a penetration tester will look like. Let us understand the importance of the C8 certification before getting to know about its content. So why should you take up the C8 version 11? The Certified Ethical Hacker is the most trusted ethical hacking certification and a recommended one by employers around the globe. Since the introduction of the C8 certification in 2003, it is globally recognized as a standard within the information security field. The C8 version 11 by EC Council continues to keep up to the standard, and it familiarizes the latest hacking techniques and teaches you advanced hacking tools and exploits used. The C8 version 11 aligns with the current cybersecurity market requirements and adds the latest advancements in the cybersecurity field. The C8 certification helps and trains you to think like a hacker, and this in turn helps you beat a hacker and defend your network. After obtaining the C8 certification, you'll be a certified ethical hacker. A certified ethical hacker is a skilled professional working in a red team environment who safeguards networks and understands attack strategies and mimics the skills of malicious hackers. Certified ethical hackers discover vulnerabilities in a system and operate with permission from the system owners only. So who can become a certified ethical hacker and who can take up the C8 certification? Let us have a look at that now. In the first case, to be eligible for the C8 certification exam, you need to attend the official training from authorized EC Council training partners. It can be an online training or tutor-led training from EC Council learning partners. Only then are you eligible to take up the C8 certification exam. So a candidate who has completed an official EC Council training is eligible to take up the exam without going through the application process. Or in the second case, in order to be considered for this credential, you need to have at least 2 years of work experience in the information security domain, and you must pay a non-refundable application fee and submit an eligibility application form. Once it is approved, you can take up the CH exam. After the application is approved, you can purchase the test voucher. In the latest version of the CH, we will see the addition of various core concepts. Moving on to our next topic, let us see how different the CH version 11 is and few of its objectives. Firstly, it outlines ethical hacking concepts, cyber kill chain concepts, an overview of information security, and various laws and regulations related to information security. This certification briefs you about the phases of system hacking, attacking techniques, and how you can maintain access. It also briefs you about footprinting concepts and ways of utilizing footprinting tools along with necessary countermeasures. The next objective is to familiarize with vulnerability assessment along with a hands-on experience of various scanning tools. Next, we have cybersecurity threats like malware threats, analysis of various worms, viruses, and trojans. Various malware concepts, packet sniffing concepts, and techniques have been introduced into this domain. It also highlights the concepts related to social engineering, denial of service attacks, SQL injection, and evasion techniques. It also speaks about wireless hacking concepts and mobile device management. The concept of operational technology is a new addition this time. Next is getting acquainted with security solutions like firewalls, honeypots, IPS, their evasion, and protection. Our fifth point is knowing various topics in cryptography like encryption algorithms, public key infrastructure, and cryptanalysis. Moving on, the next objective is to incorporate Parrot Security OS as it offers better performance on lower-powered laptops and machines when compared to Kali Linux. Next is to learn to recognize and deal with IoT-based vulnerabilities and attacks with the CH version 11 course that covers the latest IoT hacking tools. You would be required to ensure the safety of IoT devices. Our next point is with respect to the evolving cloud industry. You would need to learn how to identify and defend cloud-based threats and attacks. The latest version of CH includes new operating systems and Windows 10 configured with domain controller and vulnerable web applications for improving hacking skills. Finally, what is different is that more than 50% of the CH version 11 course is dedicated to practical skills in live ranges via EC Council Labs. EC Council leads in this aspect of the industry. Now that we saw the CH exam objectives, let us look into the CH exam topics weightage. As you see on your screens, this is a pie chart with 9 domains in CH along with their weightages. You can prepare for your exam accordingly. Let us move on and take a closer look at each of these domains, their respective subdomains, and their descriptions. Our first domain is Information Security and Ethical Hacking Overview. This domain consists of questions from information security, cyber kill chain concepts, ethical hacking concepts, various hacking concepts, and information security laws and standards. You can expect a total number of 8 questions from this domain. The weightage of this section is 6%. The second domain is Reconnaissance Techniques. Under the subdomains, we have footprinting and reconnaissance at first. This covers various topics like footprinting concepts, footprinting methodology, email footprinting, footprinting through web services, DNS footprinting, footprinting through social engineering, etc. The next subdomain in this section is Scanning Networks. Scanning networks covers various concepts like scanning tools, host discovery, port and service discovery, OS discovery, draw network diagrams, scanning beyond IDS, firewall, etc. And our third subdomain under reconnaissance techniques is enumeration. Various topics like SNMP enumeration, NTP and NFS enumeration, SMTP and DNS enumeration, and enumeration countermeasures are covered under this subdomain. A total of 26 questions will be asked from this domain. Under footprinting and reconnaissance, you will have 10 questions, and under scanning networks, another 10, and finally under enumeration, you will have 6 questions. A total weightage of 21% is given to this particular topic. Our third domain is System Hacking Phases and Attack Techniques. Under our third domain, our first subdomain is about vulnerability analysis. This subdomain covers topics on vulnerability assessment, vulnerability classification, vulnerability assessment solutions and tools, and various vulnerability assessment reports. Our next subdomain is about system hacking. You have concepts like gaining access, cracking passwords, vulnerability exploitation, escalating privileges, maintaining access covered under this subdomain. And finally, we have malware threats under this domain. Malware threats incorporate concepts like APT concepts, Trojan concepts, virus and worm concepts, malware analysis, and so on. A total of 21 questions will be asked from this domain. Under vulnerability analysis, there will be 9 questions asked, system hacking another 6 questions, and finally under malware threats, you will have 6 other questions asked. That sums up to a total 21 with a weightage of 17% for this domain. Our fourth domain is about network and perimeter hacking. Here you have various subdomains and one of it is social engineering. Under social engineering, you will be asked questions based on social engineering techniques, insider threats, impersonation on social, networking sites, identity theft, and so on. You'll also have various questions on the sniffing concepts as it is another subdomain. You can also expect questions from the denial of service subdomain. Here, questions related to botnets and DDoS attacks will be asked. Various session hijacking concepts are another crucial part of this domain. The final subdomain is about evading IDS firewalls and honeypots. Here, various concepts on IDS, IPS, firewall, and honeypots are covered. You will need to understand how to evade IDS and firewalls and how to detect honeypots. A total number of 18 questions will be asked from the fourth domain, that is network and perimeter hacking, and the weightage for this domain is 14%. Our fifth domain is about web application hacking, and our first subdomain in it is hacking web servers. This incorporates concepts related to web server attacks, web server attack tools, patch management, and so on. The next subdomain is about hacking web applications. Here you have various concepts related to bypass client-side controls, analyze web applications, footprint web infrastructure, attack access controls, and how to perform injection attacks, and so on. Finally, under the SQL injection subdomain, you will have questions based on SQL injection, the types of SQL injection, the SQL injection methodology, SQL injection tools, evasion techniques, and SQL injection countermeasures. Here, a total of 20 questions will be asked from this domain. And that is, a weightage of 16% will be given to the web application hacking domain. Our sixth domain is solely devoted to wireless network hacking. This domain focuses on hacking wireless networks, various wireless concepts, wireless encryption, wireless threats, wireless hacking tools, various hacking methodologies, Bluetooth hacking, and wireless countermeasures are covered. A total of 8 questions will be asked from this domain with a weightage of 6%. Our seventh domain is all about mobile platform IoT and OT hacking. Our first subdomain here is hacking mobile platforms. Here, the concepts that are touched upon are mobile platform attack vectors, hacking Android OS, hacking iOS, mobile device management, and mobile security guidelines and tools. Our next subdomain here is about IoT and OT hacking, which covers concepts on IoT hacking tools, its methodologies, countermeasures, and it also speaks about OT concepts, OT attacks, OT hacking tools, and OT countermeasures. You have a total of 10 questions asked from this domain with a weightage of 8%. The next domain is very interesting and it is all related to cloud. The cloud computing domain covers concepts based on cloud computing, serverless computing, cloud computing threats, cloud hacking, and cloud security. The weightage given to this domain is 6% with a total number of questions of 7. And finally, we have cryptography as our ninth domain. As the name suggests, this domain covers topics based on cryptography concepts, encryption algorithms, cryptography tools, public key infrastructure, email encryption, disk encryption, cryptanalysis, and countermeasures. And 7 questions will be asked from this domain with a weightage of 6%. Now that you saw the CH exam topics weightage, let us have a closer look at the CH exam details. Let us first have a look at the CH exam based on MCQs. The exam title is Certified Ethical Hacker with the exam code of 312-50. This exam will have 125 questions with a time limit of 4 hours. The test format is multiple choice questions. The pass percentage varies ideally between 60% to 85%. Now let's have a look at the CH practical exam details. In order to gain the CH master recognition, it is mandatory that you take up the CH practical exam as well. The exam title is Certified Ethical Hacker Practical, and this practical exam will have 20 questions with a duration of 6 hours. The exam format will be iLab Cyber Range, and finally the passing score for the CH practical exam is at 70%. After clearing both the MCQ-based exam and the practical exam, you can get the CH master recognition. Now that we had a look at the CH exam details, let us have a look at the career prospects for a professional with this certification. Having the CH certification guarantees that you have an insight into the hacking world. Hence, companies want to hire professionals who can think like a hacker and safeguard their networks and systems. A candidate with the CH certification can apply for various cybersecurity job roles such as penetration tester, security engineer, and information security analyst from the long list. According to PayScale, the annual average salary of a CH professional in India is Rs 5 lakhs per annum. Meanwhile, in the United States, a professional holding the CH certification earns nearly $93,000 on an average basis annually. Now that you had a look at the CH version 11 certification and its career prospects, what are you waiting for? Get certified with Simplilearn and bag that CH certification. When we hear the term hacker, we may picture a dangerous cyber criminal. However, not all hackers are inherently bad. They are powerful individuals who use their technical skills to break into computer networks and bypass security measures. Hacking is not always bad, and it is to be noted that the world of computers is actually safer to an extent because of a particular type of hacker. A hacker is deemed to be good or bad depending on their motive and whether or not they are breaking the law. In this video, we will acquaint you with the differences between a white hat hacker, black hat hacker, and a grey hat hacker through a short story. Hackers are basically categorized by the type of metaphorical hat they don: white hat, grey hat, and black hat. Hackers can either be a black hat or a white hat or a grey hat. Hackers can be good or bad depending on which color hat they decide to wear, and by this we mean their hacking motives, and obviously not in the sense of creating a fashion statement here. Let's have a look at our story. Our story here revolves around Dan, who is the owner of a company that provides a platform for video conferencing. His platform enables online communication for video meetings, audio meetings, and webinars. Just like other video conferencing platforms, his platform too has built-in features like chat, recording, screen sharing, and so on. Everything went well and his business increased tremendously with the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. COVID-19 accelerated the rise of the worldwide digital economy, and it made people rapidly adopt video conferencing tools and apps. In a contactless world, starting from employee interactions to family get-togethers to virtual workout classes, everything happened virtually. Dan's video conferencing platform enabled long-distance communication and enhanced collaboration. So now you might be wondering what could have gone wrong. Well, there are many risks involved when it comes to the safety of these online platforms. Online meeting rooms are susceptible to a number of digital threats. Dan received complaints from his customers that his platform wasn't secure and safe anymore. Little did Dan know that the popularity of his video conferencing platform made hackers eager to disrupt the virtual meetings and hijack the conferences. His platform witnessed complaints like the addition of an unknown participant in every meeting room, someone covering up information that is being presented, and also unknown screen recording of a meeting, to name a few. These intruders were sneaky hackers who tried to gain access to sensitive information and who tried to disrupt meetings. And how did these hackers manage to do all this? Well, this was done by exploiting weaknesses in Dan's computer network in order to obtain unauthorized access to crucial data and sensitive information. This is known as hacking, and the individuals who carry this out are known as hackers. In this form of hacking that Dan witnessed, hackers exploited Dan's company's security posture by identifying weaknesses in it in order to intrude into the meetings and gain access to business data or personal data. And this form of hacking is definitely bad and unethical. The hackers who carried this against Dan's company are known as black hat hackers. These hackers are cyber criminals who carry out cyber attacks with a negative intention. These attacks can be in the form of Trojan virus, malware attacks, phishing attacks, DDoS attacks, man-in-the-middle attacks, SQL injection attacks, and so on. So who exactly is a black hat hacker? Like in the case of Dan's organization's cyber attack, black hat hackers are highly skilled cyber criminals who break into computer systems and networks with malicious intent. They illegally hack into a system, and this is obviously without the system owner's approval. Such hackers do not abide by the laws, they violate laws and disrupt networks. The motive behind these attacks vary from monetary gains to personal profit. Usually they are for monetary gains. Black hat hackers may violate the confidentiality, integrity, or availability of a company's systems and data. They may also use malware to destroy files or steal passwords, credit card numbers, and other confidential information. Black hat hackers are also sometimes called crackers. So this is who a black hat hacker is. Moving back to Dan's story. Black hat hackers disrupted his business and he lost his customers as nobody wished to communicate on an unsecure platform. It is but true, right? Would you be okay to use a platform that is unsafe? None of us want to have unknown people in our meetings, right? This is how Dan's customers felt too, and this news spread and his company's reputation took a bad hit. That is when Ted approached Dan. So who is Ted? Let's have a look at that now. Ted, who was unknown to Dan, explained to him that he found Dan's network to be weak. Ted told Dan that he has identified vulnerabilities in Dan's systems and networks and he will fix them provided Dan pays him well. Dan had nothing to lose and without any further delay, he paid Ted a good amount of money to fix the vulnerabilities in Dan's networks. On receiving the money, Ted began his work and he fixed all the issues and vulnerabilities in Dan's network. He made sure that nobody can exploit Dan's network vulnerabilities again, and this way he safeguarded Dan's network for the time being. So who is Ted? Well, he's called a grey hat hacker. As they say, not all things are black and white. So is the concept of grey hat hackers. As fascinating as the name sounds, let us dive deep into understanding the role of a grey hat hacker. A grey hat is a security expert who may at times violate the laws or the ethical standards. However, they do not carry a malicious intent unlike a black hat hacker. Hence, they are known to work both defensively and offensively. They land between the good and the bad. Grey hat hackers look for vulnerabilities in a system without permission, but with good intentions. Just like how Ted informed Dan about how he could exploit Dan's system vulnerabilities, grey hat hackers inform an organization the same and in return ask for a fee to fix it. In some cases, when the organization doesn't comply, grey hat hackers may become black hat hackers. Although a grey hat hacker's intention might not be bad, what they do is still illegal since they do not have permission to break into another system. Back to our story. Although Dan's issue was sorted by Ted for the time being, he had a few concerns. His first concern was history repeating itself. Yes, he was worried about what if black hat hackers hack into his systems again. Although his system vulnerabilities are fixed at the moment, it was a matter of time before they could be exploited again with new hacking techniques. His next thought was to have a professional who could constantly keep a tab on his networks and protect it from hackers. Don't you think his concerns were justified? Yes, it was, as this was the only way he could provide a safe and secure video conferencing platform in the long run. That is when Dan's friend came to his rescue and introduced Anne, the ethical hacker, to him. Anne, being an ethical hacker, assured Dan that she would scan and identify his network for system vulnerabilities before an outsider exploits it, and she would fix those vulnerabilities on a regular basis. Such ethical hackers like Anne are called white hat hackers. Now that we saw who black hat hackers and grey hat hackers were, it is time we learn about our third type of hacker, who is a white hat hacker. A white hat hacker gains access to networks with an intention to fix the identified weaknesses. They also perform penetration testing and vulnerability assessments and break into systems with permission. They search for loopholes or vulnerabilities in any given piece of technology, just like how a black hat hacker would do. However, white hat hackers harden their organization system before the bad guy can get in. Their goal is to spot system and network vulnerabilities in order to improve system security. White hat hackers are also known as ethical hackers since they obey the law of the land and follow a code of ethics. Many companies and government organizations employ white hat hackers to help them secure their systems. These hackers are typically hired by organizations to look for vulnerabilities in a system like other hackers. The only difference being they are given permission to break in. Once Dan spots the vulnerabilities, she documents her findings and gives Dan advice on how to fix them, or she'll even take it up to fix them so that an outsider cannot spot it in the future. Anne does this on a regular basis as system updates happen regularly and it is imperative to be on track with it and fix new vulnerabilities. This made sure Dan's network is now safe and secure. Gradually, he regained his customers' trust and his platform got back to being one of the best and safest platforms for video conferencing. This resulted in a huge business growth and Dan was very happy. Just like how Anne put an end to Dan's business problems, There are many white hat hackers out there who are in great demand by organizations to safeguard their networks from cyber attacks. And if you are interested in a career in ethical hacking, then Simplilearn can help you fulfill your dreams. Simplilearn CH version 11 certification provides you the hands-on training required to master the techniques hackers use to penetrate network systems and fortify your system against it. This ethical hacking course is aligned with the latest CH version 11 by EC Council and will adequately prepare you to increase your blue team skills. So what are you waiting for? Get certified with Simplilearn and become a certified ethical hacker and put an end to the cybercrimes in the world. Remember, the more active white hat hackers are, the fewer opportunities black hat hackers have for system exploitation.
We humans are highly tech savvy in today's times. With the extensive use of the internet and modern technologies, there is a massive challenge in protecting all our digital data, such as net banking information, account credentials, and medical reports, to name a few. Have you heard about the deadly WannaCry ransomware attack? The attack happened in May 2017 in Asia, and then it spread across the world. Within a day, more than 230,000 computers were infected across 150 countries. The WannaCry cryptoworm encrypted the data and locked the users out of their systems. For decryption of the data, the users were asked for a ransom of $300 to $600 in Bitcoin. The users who used the unsupported version of Microsoft Windows and those who hadn't installed the security update of April 2017 were targeted in this attack. The WannaCry attack took a toll on every sector. Top-tier organizations like Hitachi, Nissan, and FedEx had to put their businesses on hold as their systems were affected too. Now, this is what you call a cyber attack. To prevent such attacks, cybersecurity is implemented. We can define cybersecurity as the practice of protecting networks, programs, computer systems, and their components from unauthorized digital attacks. These illegal attacks are often referred to as hacking. Hacking refers to exploiting weaknesses in a computer network to obtain unauthorized access to information. A hacker is a person who tries to hack into computer systems. This is a misconception that hacking is always wrong. There are hackers who work with different motives. Let's have a look at 3 different types of hackers. Black hat hackers are individuals who illegally hack into a system for monetary gain. On the contrary, we have white hat hackers who exploit the vulnerabilities in a system by hacking into it with permission in order to defend the organization. This form of hacking is absolutely legal and ethical. Hence, they are also often referred to as ethical hackers. In addition to these hackers, we also have the gray hat hackers. As the name suggests, the color gray is a blend of both white and black. These hackers discover vulnerabilities in a system and report it to the system's owner, which is a good act. But they do this without seeking the owner's approval. Sometimes gray hat hackers also ask for money in return for the spotted vulnerabilities. Now that you have seen the different types of hackers, let's understand more about the hacking that is legal and valid, ethical hacking, through an interesting story. Dan runs a trading company. He does online training with the money his customers invest. Everything was going well, and Dan's business was booming, until a hacker decided to hack the company's servers. The hacker stole the credentials of various trading accounts. He asked for a lump sum ransom in exchange for the stolen credentials. Dan took the hacker's words lightly and didn't pay the hacker. As a result, the hacker withdrew money from various customers' accounts, and Dan was liable to pay back the customers. Dan lost a lot of money, and also the trust of his customers. After this incident, Dan gave a lot of thought as to what could have gone wrong with the security infrastructure in his company. He wished there was someone from his company who could have run a test attack to see how vulnerable his systems were before the hacker penetrated into the network. This was when he realized he needed an employee who thinks like a hacker and identifies the vulnerabilities in his network before an outsider does. To do this job, he hired an ethical hacker, John. John was a skilled professional who worked precisely like a hacker. In no time, he spotted several vulnerabilities in Dan's organization and closed all the loopholes. Hiring an ethical hacker helped Dan protect his customers from further attacks in the future. This, in turn, increased the company's productivity and guarded the company's reputation. So now you know hacking is not always bad. John, in this scenario, exposed the vulnerabilities in the existing network, and such hacking is known as ethical hacking. Ethical hacking is distributed into 6 different phases. Let us look at these phases step by step with respect to how John, our ethical hacker, will act. Before launching an attack, the first step John takes is to gather all the necessary information about the organization's system that he intends to attack. This step is called reconnaissance. He uses tools like Nmap and hping for this purpose. John then tries to spot the vulnerabilities, if any, in the target system using tools like Nmap and Nexpose. This is the scanning phase. Now that he has located the vulnerabilities, he then tries to exploit them. This step is known as gaining access. After John makes his way through the organization's networks, he tries to maintain his access for future attacks by installing backdoors in the target system. The Metasploit tool helps him with this. This phase is called maintaining access. John is a brilliant hacker. Hence, he tries his best not to leave any evidence of his attack. This is the 5th phase, clearing tracks. We now have the last phase, that is reporting. In this phase, John documents a summary of his entire attack, the vulnerabilities he spotted, the tools he used, and the success rate of the attack. Looking into the report, Dan is now able to take a call and see how to protect his organization from any external cyber attacks. Don't you all think John is an asset to any organization? If you want to become an ethical hacker like John, then there are a few skills that you need to acquire. First and foremost, you need to have a good knowledge of operating environments such as Windows, Linux, Unix, and Macintosh. You must have reasonably good knowledge of programming languages such as HTML, PHP, Python, SQL, and JavaScript. Networking is the base of ethical hacking. Hence, you should be good at it. Ethical hackers should be well aware of security laws so that they don't misuse their skills. Finally, you must have a global certification on ethical hacking to successfully bag a position of an ethical hacker like John. Few examples of ethical hacking certification are Certified Ethical Hacker Certification, CEH, CompTIA Pentest Plus, and Licensed Penetration Tester Certification, to name a few. Simplilearn provides a cybersecurity expert master's program that will equip you with all the skills required by a cybersecurity expert. You could have a look at it by clicking the link in the description. The endless growth of technologies in this area is directly proportional to the number of cybercrimes. Cybercrimes are estimated to cost $6 trillion in 2021. Hence, to tackle these cybercrimes, organizations are continuously on the lookout for cybersecurity professionals. The average annual salary of a certified ethical hacker is $91,000 in the US and approximately rupees 7 lakhs in India. So, what are you waiting for? Get certified and become an ethical hacker like John and put an end to the cyber attacks in the world.
In this video, we bring you the top 10 computer hacks of all time. Let's see what we have at number 10. From April 27, 2007, Estonia, the European country, faced a series of cyber attacks that lasted for weeks. This happened when the Estonian government decided to move the bronze soldier from Tallinn center to a less prominent military cemetery located on the city's outskirts. Unprecedented levels of internet traffic took down Estonian banks' online services, media outlets, broadcasters, and government bodies. Botnets sent massive waves of spam and vast amounts of automated online requests. According to researchers, the public faced DDoS attacks. There were conflicts to edit the English language version of the Bronze Soldier's Wikipedia page as well. Although there is no confirmation, Russia is believed to be behind these cyber attacks that largely crippled the Estonian society. Let's now move on to the next attack. On December 23, 2015, several parts of Ukraine witnessed a power outage. And this was not a typical blackout, it was indeed the result of a cyber attack. Information systems of 3 energy distribution companies in Ukraine were compromised. It is the first known victorious cyber attack on a power grid. It is said that here hackers sent out phishing emails to the power companies. 30 substations were switched off and about 230,000 people were left in the dark for about 1 to 6 hours. US investigators believed that Russia-based hackers were responsible for this. Experts have warned that other countries could also be vulnerable to such attacks. Let's see what we have at number 8. In the year 1999, a cyber attack caused a 21-day shutdown of NASA computers. Unbelievable, isn't it? The hacker was none other than the then 15-year-old Jonathan James. He first penetrated US Department of Defense Division's computers and installed a backdoor on its servers. This allowed him to intercept more than 1,000 government emails, including the ones containing usernames and passwords. This helped James steal a piece of NASA software and crack the NASA computers that support the International Space Station, which cost the Space Exploration Agency's $41,000 as systems were shut down for 3 weeks. He was the first person to carry out a computer hack against the American Space Agency. Let's now move on to the next attack. In late November 2014, there was a leak of confidential data from the film studio of Sony Pictures. Information about Sony Pictures employees, their emails, copies of the then unreleased Sony films, future propositions, and other crucial data were leaked. This cyber attack was carried out by a hacker group named Guardians of Peace. So what did the hackers want? Well, they demanded that Sony withdraw its then upcoming movie, The Interview. This movie was a comedy storyline to assassinate the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. Sony then decided to cancel the film's theatrical release due to the threats at cinemas screening the movie. It is indeed hard to trace the roots of a cyber attack. In this case, after evaluation, the US intelligence officials arrived at the theory that the attack was in a way related to the government of North Korea. However, North Korea had denied the same. Moving on to our number 6. In December 2006, TJX, the US retailer company, identified that 45.6 million debit and credit card details were stolen. This happened from one of its systems over 18 months by an unknown number of intruders. It was one of the first, largest ever cyber attacks involving the loss of personal data. As a result, banks in the affected regions had to reissue and block thousands of payment cards. A group of hackers did this, Albert Gonzalez being the mastermind. The group was from Miami, the place where the TJX heist was believed to have originated. Reports said that the TJX data breach occurred because of weak web encryption at 2 of its Marshall stores in Miami. Next, moving on to our top 5, let us see what we have at number 5. The year 2010 witnessed the discovery of the deadly computer worm Stuxnet. This malware's motive was unlike any other usual cyber attacks. It aimed at destructing the equipment the computers controlled. Stuxnet came with the deadly purpose of damaging Iran's nuclear infrastructure. It infected more than 200,000 computers, including 14 industrial sites and a uranium enrichment plant in Iran. Stuxnet initially spread via Microsoft Windows and targeted Siemens industrial control systems. Although it was discovered only in 2010, it is believed to have been silently sabotaging Iran's nuclear facilities. It was one of the first discovered malware that was capable of hampering hardware systems. It largely damaged the centrifuges of the Iranian reactors. This is believed to be a cyber weapon created by the US and the Israeli intelligence, although there is no documented evidence or acceptance by either of the countries for the same. Moving on to number 4. In the year 2014, Home Depot was the victim of one of the deadliest cyber attacks. 56 million payment cards were compromised along with 53 million customer email addresses stolen. This security breach happened from April to September 2014. Criminals were believed to have used a third-party vendor's username and password to enter the perimeter of Home Depot's network. The attackers were then able to deploy custom-built malware on its self-checkout systems in the US and Canada. Moving on to our top 3. As you might be aware, the PlayStation gaming system is one of Sony's most popular products. Unfortunately, in April 2011, Sony executives witnessed abnormal activity on the PlayStation network. This resulted in the compromise of approximately 77 million PlayStation users' accounts and prevented users of PlayStation 3 and PlayStation Portable consoles from accessing this service. This forced Sony to turn off the PlayStation network on April 20th. On May 4th, Sony confirmed that personally identifiable information from each of the 77 million accounts had been exposed. The outage lasted for 23 days. Sony released almost daily announcements concerning the system outage. In the end, Sony is believed to have invested approximately $170 million to improve the network security, to investigate the attack, and to cover the expenses of caring for the consumers that had been affected. Let's now move on to the next attack at number 2. In May 2017, one of the most dangerous cyber attacks took place. It was known as the WannaCry ransomware attack caused by the WannaCry crypto worm. The victims were the users that used the unsupported version of Microsoft Windows and those who hadn't installed the new security update. This did not take place through phishing like other attacks, but through an exposed vulnerable SMB port. The attack originated in Asia and then eventually spread across the globe. In a day, more than 200,000 computers were infected across 150 countries. The WannaCry crypto worm locked the users out of the targeted systems and encrypted their data. The users were asked for a ransom of $300 to $600, which had to be paid via Bitcoin in exchange for their data. This attack took a toll on both private and government organizations. It resulted in damages from hundreds of millions to billions of dollars. In a matter of few days, the emergency patches released by Microsoft halted the attack. Also, the discovery of a kill switch prevented the infected computers from spreading the crypto worm. Security experts in a few countries believed that North Korea was behind this attack. And finally, let's see what we have at number 1. More than 2 decades ago, in March 1999, the Melissa virus, a mass-mailing macrovirus, was released. It targeted Microsoft Word and Outlook-based systems and created considerable network traffic. Melissa virus infected computers via emails. The email would look like an important message? Well, yes, it was fake. If the recipient opens the attachments in the mail and downloads the document and then opens it with Microsoft Word, a virus was released on their computers. This would then mass mail itself to the first 50 people in the victim's contact list and then disable multiple safeguard features on Microsoft Word and Microsoft Outlook. This began spreading like a wildfire across the internet. David L. Smith released the virus. The virus caused nearly $80 million worth of damages. It did not steal data or money, however, it caused a havoc. Almost 1 million email accounts were disrupted worldwide, agencies were overloaded, and some had to be shut down entirely, and internet traffic in some locations was slowed down. Hacking is a very interesting term that most of you might have come across. It is a method by which you exploit a network to gain access to crucial information. When the art of hacking is used rightfully, you can prevent various cyber attacks just like how ethical hackers safeguard our networks. On that note, hey guys, welcome to yet another exciting video by Simplilearn. In this video, we bring you the best programming languages for hacking. Here, we will give you the top 5 programming languages that will help you enhance your hacking skills. But before we begin, if you're new here and haven't subscribed already, make sure to hit the subscribe button and the bell icon for interesting tech videos every day. So let's get started. First, let's understand the importance of knowing programming for hacking. You might wonder if programming is a necessity to become a hacker. As you might be aware, hacking involves breaking the protocols and exploiting a network. Thus, being a hacker requires you to understand the languages of the software that you are focusing on. Hence, it is required that a hacker knows coding. Having zero coding knowledge will definitely limit your opportunities in the future. Knowing different programming languages is undoubtedly an asset for hackers. Everyone wants to become a hacker today, however, it is not as easy as it is shown in numerous movies. It takes plenty of practice and programming knowledge to become an ethical hacking expert. If you want to become a hacker, it is imperative that you have a knack for programming languages. It is a known fact that some of the world's best hackers started off as programmers. If you know how to program, you will be able to dissect a code and analyze it. You can write your scripts or malware that can be used on the victim. Yes, there are several ready-made scripts available today. However, you might need to apply your skills in case the available scripts don't work well for you. Sometimes when script modification is required, you should be in a position to do that. In such a scenario, zero knowledge of the respective programming language will definitely be a hindrance. Programs can also help you automate multiple tasks which would normally take a lot of time. Codes allow you to penetrate different fields you want to hack. It will help you identify the plan behind an attack and defend against deadly hacking techniques and make your cybersecurity career worthwhile. It will help you understand the working of the target system or application before carrying out an exploit. Now that we have an idea as to why programming is important for hackers, let us understand which programming languages should a hacker learn. There are several programming languages for hacking, and it might be overwhelming to choose from the endless list. Here we are to help you with that. Do keep in mind that your choice of programming language will also depend on the type of system you are targeting and your strategy. Let us now move on to the list of the top programming languages that are extensively used by hackers around the world. As you see on your screens, here we have the top 5 programming languages for hackers. Let us go through them one by one. Number 1 on our list is one of the most popular programming languages today, that is Python. Python is a general-purpose programming language, and in the field of hacking, it is mainly used for exploit writing. It is referred to as the de facto hacking programming language. It plays a crucial role in writing hacking scripts, exploits, and malicious programs. One great feature that makes hacking easy with Python is the availability of ready-made modules. For example, OS modules are available if the target is a native operating system. For networking, there is a socket module and a lot more. Python socket programming can be used for discovering vulnerabilities in a system, since Python code helps in checking the security integrity of systems, and it can also be used to exploit them. Python has a massive community that helps with third-party plugins every day. It is also an easy-to-read language with a simple syntax. This will be helpful for beginners. You can easily write automation scripts using Python, and it also makes prototyping much faster. Moving on to our second programming language, we have JavaScript. Currently, JavaScript is one of the best programming languages for hacking web applications. A good understanding of JavaScript allows a hacker to discover vulnerabilities and carry web exploitations, since most of the web apps use JavaScript or one of its libraries. Knowing JavaScript will help you discover flaws in web applications. JavaScript can be used to read saved cookies, and security experts also use JavaScript to develop cross-site scripting programs for hacking. JavaScript is known for carrying out attacks like cross-site scripting. JavaScript can also be used to spread and reproduce malware and viruses easily. Initially, JavaScript was a client-side scripting language. However, with the release of Node.js, it now supports back-end development. This implies a larger field for exploitation. A hacker can now use JavaScript to snoop the typed words, inject malicious code, and track browsing history, to name a few. Number 3 on our list is PHP. Hypertext Preprocessor, or PHP, is a dynamic server-side programming language that is used to build websites. Hackers should understand PHP, as it will help them understand web hacking techniques better. Especially if you're into web hacking, then getting your hands on PHP would be an asset. PHP is used in server-side scripting. Using PHP, you could write a custom application that modifies settings on a web server and makes the target server susceptible to attacks. With the help of PHP, you can also eliminate any vulnerabilities in your code. PHP is one of the most powerful server-side languages used in most of the web domains. This shows how learning PHP can help you with web hacking and also help you fight against malicious attackers. Popular content management systems run on a foundation of PHP. Hence, having a strong knowledge of PHP can help you protect or compromise such websites. Next on our list of the best programming languages for hackers is SQL. SQL is the acronym for Structured Query Language. Although SQL is not a traditional programming language, it is a language used for only communicating with databases. Several systems like MySQL, PostgreSQL store their data in databases. SQL is used to interact with such databases in order to organize, add, retrieve, delete, or edit data from a database. Having an in-depth knowledge of SQL lets you comprehend the structure of a database, thereby helping you decide which scripts or tools to deploy. SQL is used for the purpose of web hacking. SQL is undoubtedly the best programming language when it comes to hacking into large databases. It will be impossible to counteract database attacks without a good understanding of SQL. Using SQL, hackers can perform an attack known as SQL injection attack. Such an attack enables hackers to access confidential information from databases. SQL is used by hackers to develop various hacking programs based on SQL injection. SQL injection is used to bypass web application login algorithms that are weak. Such an attack can also help a hacker view and modify confidential information from databases. Finally, at number 5, we have the C programming language. It is no surprise that we have C, the mother of all programming languages, on our list. It is used massively in the security field. It helps with exploit writing and development. The low-level nature of C provides an edge over other programming languages used for hacking. A hacker can use the C programming language to his or her advantage when it comes to accessing low-level hardware components such as the RAM. Security professionals mostly use C when they are required to manipulate system resources and hardware. C also helps penetration testers write programming scripts. Most operating systems and computer programs are coded in C language. Hence, learning C, you will help hackers get an overview of the structure of operating systems. C is also used to create shellcodes, rootkits, exploits, build undetectable malware, keyloggers, and much more. Sometimes it is also advisable to learn both C and C++ as they both come in handy for hackers. So those were our top 5 programming languages for hackers. Do keep in mind that the most important step of becoming a hacker is to learn various programming languages. It will be great if you can master a variety of programming languages, as your target will not be the same always. On that note, in addition to previously mentioned programming languages, we have an additional list of languages that are also well recognized for hacking. Let's have a look at our honorary mention. First, we have Ruby. The Ruby programming language has been used for exploitation for quite some time now. There can be a close comparison drawn between Ruby and Python based on its syntax. However, Ruby is more web-focused. Ruby can be used to write either small or large scripts and can be used interchangeably with Bash scripting. It offers good flexibility while writing exploits. Ruby has been used by several hackers to exploit corporate systems. It is not that easy to master Ruby, and that is one reason why MNCs look for professionals who know Ruby. Second, we have Perl. Although Perl has lost its old fame, it still holds value in the hacker community for exploit writing. There are systems that still run on Perl, as it was the go-to solution once. It is a great language that can help you manipulate Linux text files and help you create tools and exploits. Perl code bases still do occupy a considerable portion of corporate tools. Third on our list is HTML. Many of you might have wondered why we didn't mention HTML yet. Yes, no programming list is complete without mentioning HTML. The Hypertext Markup Language, HTML, is a standard markup language used for creating web pages. It glues the whole internet together, and it is the language of the web. This shows the importance HTML has. An understanding of HTML is vital to play with web applications. HTML also finds its use in developing hybrid mobile and desktop apps. HTML is a must if you want to master this field. Having said that, HTML is not that tough a language to learn. Hence, it is advised to master HTML if you want to compromise web applications. And finally, at 4 we have assembly level language. It is undoubtedly one of the most powerful yet hardest programming languages to learn. It is a complicated low-level programming language. For hacking primitive systems, assembly is one of the best programming languages. The best part of assembly is that you can instruct machine hardware or software using it. Assembly language helps a hacker manipulate systems straight up at the architecture level. It is also the most suited coding language to build malware like viruses and trojans. It is considered to be the best language for jobs that are time critical. Reverse engineers use assembly language. For example, if you're interested in software cracking and if you want to reverse engineer a piece of software that has already been compiled, assembly is the go-to choice. As complicated as a language sounds, the results it produces are highly fruitful. So those were the additional programming languages that can help you become a skilled and successful hacker. We should keep in mind that a strong understanding of programming languages helps cybersecurity professionals stay on top of cyber criminals.
Let's talk about hacking and what exactly hacking is. Hacking refers to exploiting weaknesses in a computer network to obtain unauthorized access to information. A hacker is a person who tries to hack into computer systems. Now here there are some keywords that we need to understand. First and foremost, exploit. When you are exploiting weaknesses are technically called vulnerabilities, which are basically design flaws, misconfiguration errors, usage of default usernames and passwords which have not been modified. So any misconfiguration or anything that has been left behind by a security administrator that can be misused, which means exploited by a hacker to gain unauthorized access. So the next term is unauthorized access, something that you're not allowed to do. And when you say a hacker is a person who tries to hack, it's basically a person with malicious intent trying to gain access to a system or a resource that they are not authorized to access in the first place. How do they do it? They find a vulnerability, that is a weakness or a flaw, and then they misuse it to gain access to that particular network. So here in the diagram, you can see that the sender on the left hand side is trying to send some data to the receiver on the right hand side. The hacker would try to gain unauthorized access to the transmission that is being sent and would try to capture the data packets and read the secrets within. Let's look at a business case scenario into hacking. Now there is an organization, everybody is going around their own business when they realize that their systems may have been compromised. Now they're trying to look at the customer data to ensure that that has not been compromised and trying to assure the customers. However, they do realize that some customer data has been lost and even the company reports have been modified as well. Now this is the scenario where there have been some security controls in place and those controls have been identified. They realized that there is an attack that has happened, and based on that attack they have realized that the data has now been compromised and the records have been modified by the hacker, which means that the data is no longer trustworthy and thus cannot be used by the business for any legal transactions. So then the hacker gives a call to the organization or gets connected to the organization demanding a ransom for the data to be replaced, to be taken back into the original state where it was trusted, and thus the organization can utilize it for business transactions. The organization has probably no backup, so they decide that they want to pay the lump sum to the hacker to restore that data so that they can continue on with the business. Thus money exchanges and the hacker is able to restore that data and the business continues as usual. However, the activity here of a hacker trying to leverage the misconfiguration of the weaknesses in the organization's security, thus being able to hack them and make these ransomware demands. So the company then wants to figure out, even if having a security system in place, how was the hacker able to hack their systems? Thus, one of the employees comes up with a brilliant idea of identifying vulnerabilities in the network to proactively search for any flaws that have been left behind, so that they can plug those flaws and nobody can misuse them. Thus, they figure out that they want to hire an ethical hacker who would help them identify the security posture of the organization, identify the weaknesses, vulnerabilities and flaws, and help them remedy those flaws so that in future scenarios, these scenarios will not happen. So before we go into an ethical hacker, let's understand what are the types of hackers. So what are the types of hackers? Hacker is a technically skilled person who is very adept with computers. They have good programming skills, they understand how operating system works, they understand how networks work, they understand how to identify flaws and vulnerabilities within all of these aspects, and then they understand and know how to misuse these flaws to get a outcome which would be detrimental to the health of the organization. So there's 6 types of hackers that have been identified: black hat hackers, white hat hackers, grey hat, script kiddies, nation sponsored hackers, and hacktivists. So black hat hackers are basically the malicious hackers who have malicious intent and have criminalistic tendencies. They want to harm the organization by hacking into their infrastructure, by destroying their infrastructure, by destroying their data, so that they can gain from it from a monetary perspective. These guys are also known as crackers. The main aspect of these people are that they have malicious intent, they try to do unauthorized activities, and they try it for personal gain. Another important aspect to remember is that a black hat hacker will always try to hide their identity. They will spoof their online digital identity by masking it, by spoofing their IP addresses, MAC addresses, and try to remain anonymous on the network. A white hat hacker, on the other hand, is also an ethical hacker or a security analyst who's an individual who will do exactly the same thing that a black hat hacker would do, minus the malicious intent, plus the intent of helping the organization identifying the flaws and remedying them so that nobody else can misuse those vulnerabilities. So they are authorized to act on the company's behalf. They are authorized to do that activity which would help the company identify those flaws and thus help the company mitigate those flaws, improving on their security posture. So these kind of security experts or ethical hackers would help organizations defend themselves against unauthorized attacks. Grey hat hackers is a blend of both white hat and black hat hackers. So here they can work defensively and offensively both. They can accept contracts from organizations to increase their security posture. At the same time, they can also get themselves involved in malicious activities towards other organizations to personally gain or benefit from them by doing unauthorized activity. Script kiddies are people who are technically not much aware about what hacking is. They rely on existing tools that have been created by other hackers. They have no technical knowledge of what they're doing. It's just a hit or miss for them. So they just get their hands on a tool. They try to execute those tools. If the hack works, it works. Otherwise, it doesn't. So these people are basically who are noobs or newbies who are trying to learn hacking, or just people who with malicious intent who just want to have some fun or trying to impress people around. Then we have the nation or the state-sponsored hackers. As the name suggests, these hackers are sponsored by their government. Now, this may not be a legitimate job, but most of the governments do have hackers enrolled in their pay on their organizations to spy on their enemies, to spy on various countries and try to figure out the aspirations of those countries. So this is basically a spying activity where you're technically trying to get access to other countries' resources and then try to spy on them to figure out what their activities have been or what their future plans have been. And then we have the hacktivists, who is an individual who has a political agenda to promote, and they promote it by doing hacking. So these guys, what is the difference between a black hat hacker and a hacktivist? The black hat hacker may try to hide their identity. A hacktivist will claim responsibility of what they have done. So for them, it's a political agenda, a political cause, and they will try to hack various organizations to promote their cause. They would probably do this by defacing the website and posting the messages that they want to promote on these websites. So what exactly is ethical hacking then? We have discussed the types of hackers. We have identified a malicious hacker as a black hat hacker with the intent of doing harm to an organization's network for personal gain. We have discussed what the ethical hacker is. So an ethical hacker would be doing the same activity but in an authorized manner. So they would have legal contracts that they would be signing with the organization, which would give them a definite scope of what they're allowed to do and what they are not allowed to do. And the ethical hackers would function within those scopes, would try to execute those test scenarios where they would be able to identify those flaws or those system vulnerabilities, and then they would be submitting a report to the management of what they have found. They would also help the management to mitigate or to resolve those weaknesses so that nobody else can misuse them later on. They might use the same techniques and the same tools that black hat hackers do. However, the main difference here is that these guys are authorized to do that particular activity. They're doing it in a controlled manner with the intent of helping the organization and not with the intent of personal gains. So who's an ethical hacker? Again, an ethical hacker is a highly intelligent, highly educated person who knows how computers function, how programming languages work, how operating systems work. They can troubleshoot. They're technically very adept at computing. They understand the architecture. They understand how various components in a computer work. They can troubleshoot those components, and they can basically be very good with programming as well. Now, when I say programming, we don't want an ethical hacker to be a good developer of applications. We want them to understand programming in such a way that they can create scripts, they can write their own short programs like viruses, worms, trojans, or exploits which would help them achieve the objective that they have set out for. So here you can see the ethical hacker. They are individuals who perform a security assessment of their companies with the permission of concerned authorities. So what is a security assessment? A security assessment is finding out the exact security posture of the organization by identifying what security controls are in place, how they've been configured, and if there are any gaps in the configurations themselves. So an organization will hire an ethical hacker. They would give the ethical hacker the information about what information is or what security controls, what firewalls, what IDSS, IPSS, intrusion detection or intrusion prevention systems, antiviruses are already in place, and then they will ask the ethical hacker to figure out a way to bypass these mechanisms and see if they can still hack the organization. What is the need of an ethical hacker? The need of an ethical hacker is proactive security. The ethical hacker would identify all the existing flaws in an organization and try to resolve those flaws to help secure the organization from black hat hackers. So ethical hackers would prevent hackers from cracking into an organization's network by securing the organization, by improving on their security on a periodic basis. And they would also try to identify system vulnerabilities, network vulnerabilities, or application level vulnerabilities that would have been missed or have already been missed, and then try to figure out a way of plugging them or resolving them so that they cannot be misused by other hackers. They would also analyze and enhance an organization's security policies. Now, what are policies? Policies are basically documents that have been created by an organization of rules that all the employees need to follow to ensure that the security of an organization is maintained. For example, a password policy. A password policy would help users in an organization to adhere to the standards the organization has identified for a password complexity. For example, a password, when a user is creating them, should adhere to standards where they are using random words. They contain the alphabet A through Z, uppercase and lowercase, 0 through 9 as numerics, and special characters, and they are randomized so that the password becomes more stronger to prevent from brute force attacks. So what would an ethical hacker do at this point in time? They would try to test the strength of the passwords to see if brute force attacks or dictionary attacks are possible, and if any of these passwords can be cracked. They would ensure that all the employees are following the policies and all the passwords are as secured as the policies want them to be. If there are any gaps in the policies or the implementation of the policy, it is the ethical hacker's responsibility to identify those gaps and warn the organization about it. Similarly, they would also try to protect any personal information, any data that is owned by the organization that is critical for the functioning of the organization, and they will try to protect it from falling into the hacker's hands. Now, what are the skills that are required of an ethical hacker? These are the following skills. So first and foremost, they should have good knowledge with operating systems such as Windows, Linux, Unix, and Mac. Now, when we say knowledge about operating systems, it's not only about how to use those operating systems, but how to troubleshoot those operating systems, how these operating systems work, how these operating systems need to be configured, how can they be secured. For example, securing an operating system is not only installing a firewall and an antivirus, but you need to configure permissions on an operating system of what users are allowed to do and what users are not allowed to do. For example, limiting the installation of applications. How are we going to do that? We need to go into the system center, the security center of Windows, and we need to configure security parameters over there of what are acceptable softwares and what are not. Same with Linux and Mac softwares, operating systems. So we need to know how we can secure these operating systems. Similarly, all of these would have desktop versions and server versions of operating systems. As an ethical hacker, we need to know the desktop and server versions both, how to configure them and how to provide services within the organization on these servers so that they can be consumed in a secure manner by all the employees. At the same time, they should also be knowledgeable of programming languages or scripting languages such as PHP, Python, Ruby, HTML for programming, if you will, because web servers come into the picture. So again, they should not be great developers where they can create huge applications, but they should be able to develop scripts, understand those scripts, analyze those scripts, and figure out what the output should be of those scripts to achieve the hacking goals that they have set out for. An ethical hacker should have a very good understanding about networking. No matter whether you're in application security, you're in network security, or you're in host-based security, since a computer will always be connected to a network, either a local area network like a LAN or the internet, we should know how networking works. We should know the 7 layers of the OSI model. We should know which protocols work on those 7 layers. We should identify the TCP/IP model and how a OSI model can be mapped to the TCP/IP model. We should understand how TCP and UDP work, how each and every protocol is crafted, how they are supposed to behave for us to analyze and understand any network-based attacks. We should be very good in security measures, so we should know where those vulnerabilities would lie, what are the latest exploits available in the market, and we should be able to identify them. We should be able to know the techniques and the tools of how to deal with security, how to analyze security, and then how to implement security to enhance it as well. Along with that, it is important that a security analyst or an ethical hacker is aware of the local security laws and standards. Why is that? Because an organization cannot do any illegal activity. Whatever responses that they have, whatever security mechanisms, whatever security controls they will implement, they need to be adhering to the local law of the land. They should be legal in nature and should not cause undue harm to any of the employees or any of the third-party clients that they are dealing with. So the ethical hacker should be aware of what security laws are before they implement security controls, or even before they start testing for security controls. And all of these should be backed up by having a global certification or a globally valid certification related to networking, related to security, ethical hacking, the law of the land, anything and everything. Maybe even programming. It's good to have a certification in PHP, Perl, Python, Ruby, and so on and so forth. Why? Because most of the organizations, when they hire ethical hackers, look out for these certifications, especially globally valid certifications, so that they can be sure, or they can be assured that the person that they are hiring has the required skill set. So let's talk about a few of the tools that an ethical hacker would utilize in their testing scenarios. To be honest, there are hundreds of tools out there. What you see on the screen are just a few examples of them. Nessus is a vulnerability scanner. What is a vulnerability scanner? It is an automated tool that is designed to identify vulnerabilities within hosts, within operating systems, within networks. So they come with their ready-made databases of all the vulnerabilities that have already been identified, and they scan the network against that database to find out any possible flaws or any possible vulnerabilities that currently exist on the host or the operating system or on the network. Similarly, there would be application scanners like acquaint or Arachne that would help you scan applications and identify flaws within those applications as well. Now, all of these are automated tools. The essence of ethical hacker is when these tools churn out the reports, the ethical hacker can understand these reports, analyze them, identify the flaws, and then craft their own exploits or use existing exploits in a particular manner so that they can get access, or they can bypass the access or security controls mechanisms that are already in place. How can they do that? With the tool called Metasploit. You see that big M there on the right hand side? That M logo is for a tool called Metasploit, which is a penetration testing tool. What is a penetration testing tool? It is that tool that will allow an ethical hacker to craft their exploits or choose their exploits for the vulnerabilities that have been identified by Nessus. Since we are interacting with computers, we will always be interacting using tools, right? So the first tool, Nessus, identifies the flaws and the possible list of vulnerabilities. We do a penetration test using Metasploit to validate those flaws and to verify that those flaws actually exist, and try to figure out the complexity of those flaws. And that's where Metasploit helps us do that. Wireshark would be used in the background while we are doing both the activities using Nessus or Metasploit to keep a track of what packets are being sent and received on the network, which will help us analyze those packets. So whenever I run a Nessus scanner, I would run a Wireshark in the background. It will capture the data packets, and I can go through those data packets and analyze that data packets to identify what Nessus is actually trying to do. Similarly, when I try to attack a machine using exploit on Metasploit, I will keep on Wireshark running in the background to capture the data packets that have been sent and the responses that I've received from the victim, so that I can also go through those packets and analyze the responses and analyze the attack, whether it was successful, to what extent was it successful, and basically will also give me a validation, a proof of the activity that has happened. Nmap is another automated tool that allows me to scan for open ports and protocols. So why would I use Nmap? Because ports and protocols become an entry point for a hacker to gain access to devices. For example, when we connect to a web server, we connect through a web browser, but we automatically connect to port 80 using HTTP and port 443 is using HTTPS. So if I'm connecting to a web server using HTTPS, it is safe to assume that port 443 on the web server is open to accept those connections. Similarly, there would be other services that may be left open on the web server because nobody thought about configuring it, or they misconfigured the web server and they left unwanted services running. So Nmap will allow me to scan those ports and services and allow me to understand what services are being offered on that server, so then I can start analyzing that server, identify those flaws within those services, and then try to attack them. If the application that I'm analyzing is connected to a database and I want to do a SQL injection attack, or if Nessus tells me that there is a SQL injection attack that may be possible on that particular application, I can use an automated tool called SQL map or SQL map that would allow me to automatically craft all the queries that are required for a SQL injection attack and help me do that attack at the same time. So here I do not have to manually create my own queries. The SQL map tool would automatically create them for me. What I would do is I would use Nessus to identify that particular flaw. If Nessus reports that flaw, I would then go use the tool SQL map, configure it to attack that particular web server, and when I fire off the tool, it will then automatically start directing queries, SQL injection queries to the database to see if those databases are vulnerable, and if yes, what data can be retrieved from those databases. So all of these tools in a nutshell would help me hack networks, applications, operating systems, and host devices. And this is what an ethical hacker does. They use these kind of tool sets, they identify what attacks they need to do, they identify the right tool for that particular attack, and they write their exploits, they create those attacks, and then they start attacking, analyze the response, and then give a report to the management, providing them feedback about how the attack was created or crafted, what was the response to that attack, and whether the attack was successful or not. If successful, they would also give recommendations of what to do to prevent these attacks from happening in the future. So when we are doing these attacks, or when we want to launch these attacks, what is the process that we would follow? So there are 6 steps that we would do as an ethical hacker. If you're just a hacker, you probably wouldn't do the 6th step, which is a reporting step. So the first step that would be done is the reconnaissance phase, which is the information gathering phase, which is very important from an ethical hacker's perspective or a hacker's perspective. Because if I want to attack someone or something as a digital device, I need to know what I'm attacking. I need to know the IP address of the device, the MAC address of those devices. I need to know the operating system, the build or the version of that operating systems, applications on top, the versions of those applications, so I know what I'm attacking. For example, if I want to attack a server, I assume it's a Windows-based server and I use a particular tool to attack it, but it actually turns out to be a Linux-based server, my attacks are going to be unsuccessful. So I need to focus my attack based on what is there at the other end. So in my information gathering phase, I want to identify all of that information. Once I have that information done, I'm going to scan those servers using tools like Nmap that we just talked about, and we're going to try to see the open ports, open services, and protocols that are running on that server that can give me possible entry points within the network or within the device or within the operating system. At the same time, along with the scanning with Nmap, I would run a vulnerability scanner, the Nessus vulnerability scanner we talked about, or acquaint for applications, and then I would try to identify vulnerabilities in those applications, operating systems, or networks. Once I have identified those vulnerabilities in the scanning phase, I would then move on to the gaining phase, where I would then craft my exploits or choose existing exploits and start attacking the victim. At this point in time, if my attack is successful, I will probably have gained access by either cracking passwords or escalating privileges or exploiting a vulnerability that I may have found during the scanning phase. Once I have gained my access, I want to maintain my access. Why? Because the vulnerability may not be there for long. Maybe somebody updated the operating system and hence the flaw was no longer existing, or somebody changed the password that I may have cracked, thus I no longer have access. So what do I do to maintain my access? I install Trojans or backdoor entries to those systems using which I can secretly, in a covert manner, get access to those devices at my own will, at my own time, as long as those devices are available over the network. So that's where I maintain my access. I have hacked them. Now I want to maintain my access, so I install a software which would give me a backdoor entry to that device no matter what. Once I have done this, I want to clear my tracks. So whatever activity that I've been doing, for example, installing a Trojan. A Trojan is also a software that would create directories and files once installed on the victim's machine. So I want to hide that. If I have accessed data stores, if I have modified data, I want to hide that activity, because if the victim comes to know that something has happened, they would start increasing their security parameters. They might start scanning their devices. They may take them offline. Thus my hack would no longer be efficient. The reason I'm clearing my tracks is that the victim doesn't find out that they have been hacked or they have been compromised, or even if they do find out that they've been compromised, they cannot trace the compromise back to me. So I would be deleting references of any of the IP addresses or MAC addresses that I may have used to attack that particular device. And this is where I will be able to identify where those logs were created, where those traces are. Once I take off those traces, the victim would not be any wiser of whether they have been compromised or who compromised their system. And if I am successful at all of these stages, or to whatever extent the success that I've achieved in any of these stages, I would then create a report based on that, and I would report to the management about the activities that we have been able to do and whatever we have been able to achieve out of those activities. For example, we identified 10 different flaws. There were 20 different attacks that we wanted to do. What attack did we do? What was the outcome of that attack? What was the intended or the expected output of that attack? I'll create a report which would give a detailed analysis of all the steps that were taken, along with screenshots and evidences of what activity was conducted, what was the output, what was the expected output, and I would submit that report to the management, giving them an idea of what vulnerabilities and flaws exist in their environment or their devices that need to be mitigated so that the security can be enhanced. So these are the 6 steps that the ethical hacking process would take. Just going through this, the reconnaissance is where you're going to use hacking tools like Nmap, acquaint to obtain information about targets. There are hundreds of tools out there depending on what information you want. Then in scanning, again, Nmap, Nexpose, these kind of tools to be utilized to identify open ports, protocols, and services. In gaining access, you're going to exploit a vulnerability by using the Metasploit tool that we talked about in the previous slides. In the maintaining access, you're going to install backdoors. You can use Metasploit at the same time. You can craft your own scripts to create a Trojan and install it on the victim's machine. Once you have achieved that, clearing tracks is where you're going to clear all evidences of your activity so that you do not get caught or the victim doesn't even realize that they have been hacked. And once you've done all of this, we are going to create reports that are going to be submitted to the management to help them understand the current security evaluation of their organization. So now let's see how we can hack using social engineering. Now, what is social engineering? Social engineering is the art of manipulating humans into revealing confidential information which they otherwise would not have revealed. So this is where your social skill and your people skills come into the picture. If you are able to communicate effectively to another person, they would probably give up more information that they intended to give out. Let's look at examples, right? If you see on the screen, phishing activity. What is phishing? We receive a lot of fake mails on a regular basis. We have always received those emails where we have won a lottery of a few $1 million, but we have never realized that we didn't purchase a lottery to win a lottery in the first place. We have always had those Nigerian frauds where a prince died in some South African country and you out of 7 billion people on the planet have been identified where they want to transfer a few $100 million through your account and they want to give you 50% of that money in return as thank you. So some very basic attacks where you go onto websites and there's a banner flashing at you saying congratulations, you're the 1 millionth visitor to this website, click here to claim your prize. All of these are social engineering attacks, phishing attacks, fake websites, fake communications being sent out to users to prey on their gullibility. Most of humans always have that dream of striking it rich, winning a huge lottery once and for all, and living their life lavishly ever after. But sadly, in the real world, that doesn't happen that often. And if you're receiving those mails, it is very important that you first research the validity of those communications before you even want to act upon them. So why are humans susceptible to social engineering? Because humans have emotion. Machines do not. Try pleading with a machine to give you access to an account that you have forgotten a password to. The machine wouldn't even know what you're doing. Try pleading with a human, sympathy or empathy, where you could try to create a social engineering attack where you can plead with them saying, if I do not get access to this account immediately, I might lose my job. And then that would put my family into problems. Somebody would feel empathy or sympathy towards you and help you reset that password and give you access to that account. It's how good the attack is and how convincing you are for the success of this attack to happen. So what is a familiarity exploit? Attackers interact with victims to gain information which will benefit the attackers to crack credentials. As passwords, if we want to reset our passwords, what do we have as a mechanism to resetting passwords? We have some security questions that we set up. Those questions are nothing but personal information that we would know, but through a social engineering attack, it would be easily be able to gather the information that you have set for your security questions. The security questions can be as simple as the first school that you attended. You probably have that listed on your LinkedIn profile, where a person can just go in there and see your academic qualifications and identify the school that you were in, right? Similarly, it might also be a question, what was your mother's maiden name? That's a very good attack. And that's, if a person can interact with you, let's say they are trying to take a survey and they approach you for a feedback on a particular product that you have been utilizing and they ask you these questions, you wouldn't think twice before giving those answers. As long as the request sounds legitimate to us, we are able to justify that request, we do answer those queries. So it's upon us to verify the authenticity of the request coming in before we answer it. Phishing, as discussed, would be fraudulent emails which appear to be coming from a trusted source. So email spoofing comes into mind, fake websites, and so on and so forth. Exploiting human curiosity. Curiosity killed the cat, right? So there's so many physical attacks where hackers just keep pen drives lying around in a parking lot. Now this is a generic attack. Whoever falls victim will fall victim. So if I just throw around a few USBs in the parking lot, obviously with Trojans implemented on them, some people who are curious or who are looking for a couple of freebies might take up those pen drives, plug them in their computers to see what data is on the pen drives. At the same time, once they plug in those pen drives on their computers, the virus or the Trojan would get infected and cause harm to their machine. Then exploiting human greed. We just talked about the Nigerian frauds and the lotteries, those kind of attacks, the fake money making gimmicks. Now basically this is where you prey upon the person's greed kicking in, and they are clicking on those links in order to get that money that has been promised to them in that email. So one of the safest mechanism to keep data private and to keep yourself secure is using encryption. Now encryption can happen through cryptography. What is cryptography? Cryptography is the art of scrambling data using a particular algorithm so that the data becomes unreadable to the normal user. The only person with the key to unscramble that data would be able to unscramble it and make sense out of that data. So we're just making it unreadable or non-readable by using a particular key or a particular algorithm, and then we're going to send the key to the end user. The end user using this same key would then decrypt that data. If anybody compromises that data while it is being sent over the network, since it is encrypted, they would not be able to read it. So the encryption algorithm would be something like this. Now if you see the computer word once made into unreadable format would look like EQORXVGT. For an end user it wouldn't make any sense, but the person who has a key to unscramble that would be able to convert it back to computer and then understand the meaning of that word. So this is just a substitution cipher that is being shown on the screen. So what is the alphabet? The key is alphabet plus 3. So C plus 3 alphabets, that becomes E. O becomes Q. M becomes O. So the key that is utilized to scramble the data is the character that you are at. The third character from there would be the corresponding key. So the encrypted message is also known as a cipher. The decryption is just the other way around, where you know the key now and you can now figure out what that E corresponded to by going back 3 characters in the alphabet. Most of the times a certified ethical hacker must decrypt a message without knowing the secret key. So let's say a ransomware has affected your organization or has affected a device, and you want to figure out or you want to decrypt that data. Now as an ethical hacker, you wouldn't be for paying a ransom to the hacker, would you? So it is now your prerogative of how you're going to work around and how you're going to try to crack the encryption mechanism, how to crack the cipher to decrypt that message and see what's within it, right? Decryption without the use of a secret key, that is known as a cryptanalysis. Cryptanalysis is the reversing of an algorithm to figure out what the decryption was without using a key. So cryptanalysis can be done using various formats. The first one is a brute force attack, second is a dictionary attack, the third one is a rainbow table attack. A brute force attack is trying every combination, permutation and combination of the key to figure out what the key was. It is 100% successful, but may take a lot of time. A dictionary attack is where you have created a list of possible encryption mechanisms, a list of possible cracks, and then you try to figure out whether those cracks work or not. Rainbow tables are where you have an encrypted text in hand and you're trying to figure out the similarities between the text that you have and the encrypted data that you wanted to decrypt in the first place. So in the brute force attack, you're trying every possible combination, permutation of what the key would be. In dictionary attack, you have a word list that would tantamount to the key, and if you're trying to match all the words listed in the text file or the word list to see if any of those words are going to work to decrypt that data. Here in the rainbow table, the ciphertext is compared with another ciphertext. You find out similarities and then you try to work or reverse engineer your way accordingly. So let's have a quick demo on cryptography before we end this session. So to begin with the demo of cryptography, we are on a website called spammimic.com, which will help us scramble the message that we created into a completely format which would be unrelated to the topic at hand. So if I say I want to encode a message, turn a short message into spam. So what this does is, you want to send across a secret message, you type in the secret message. a short one, it will convert that into a spam mail. You send it across, so whoever's reading that spam mail would never get an idea of the embedded message within it. So if I want to type in a message here, hi, this is a secret message, the password is ASD@1234, and I want to send this out to people or to one of my colleagues, but I want to send it out in a secret manner so that others are not aware of this. So when I press on encode, what the algorithm will do is it will convert this message into a spam mail. So my message, hi, this is a secret message, the password is @1234 or ASD@1234, gets converted into this. Now if you read it, dear e-commerce professional, this letter was specially selected to be sent to you. This doesn't make sense. There is nowhere or no reference to the actual message that I've already said. So if I copy this entire message and I send it, let's say via email, to the recipient. Now the thing is that the recipient needs to know that I've encoded it using spam mimic. The algorithm needs to remain the same. So once they know that it is spam mimic, what they can do is, now in this instance what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up a new browser and I'm going to go to the same website. And at this point in time, I'm going to click on decode. When I click on decode, I'm going to paste the message that I've just copied. There we are. And this message is now being copied into a different browser. And if I decode this, you will see that it will convert it back to the original message that there was. So the key is there at spam mimic, and it is embedded within the message. So whenever we paste the message in the decode factor, it knows what the key was and it can decrypt that message and give me the actual message that was embedded within it. There we are, the entire message. This is what we created in the Google Chrome browser, and in the Firefox browser we decoded. Similarly, if I want to protect these kind of messages, there is an aspenencrypt.com website where, let's say, we use text encryption and I want to encrypt the same message. This is a secret message, the password is ASD@1234, and then I give it a password to protect this message, let's say the word password, and I use the cipher to scramble this by using, let's say, AES, which is the strongest cipher right now, and I say encrypt. So this is what the encryption would look like, and basically if I don't have the password over here, if I decrypt it, you would see that the error has occurred. Now if I type in the password over here and then decrypt it, it will be able to convert that back into the unscrambled text, and it will give me what the original message was. This is a secret message. The password is ASD@1234. So if I want to keep my data secure from hackers, I want to scramble it in such a way that they would not be able to crack it, or it would be very difficult for them to crack it. And this is one of the first mechanisms that would be recommended by any ethical hacker to keep the data secure. Now let's talk about downloading and installing Kali Linux. Along with that, we'll also be looking at the basic commands that are required for Kali Linux. Alright, so I've opened my browser and we want to go to the Kali website. So we want to go to kali.org. You can directly type in kali.org and go to the website. I can just do a Google search and say Kali download, and it will give you the same website, but it will directly take you to the downloads pages. So either here or you can go to the home page. Cookies are being installed on your machine, so see which cookies you want to allow. I'm only going to use the necessary cookies to support this site, and you can see that this gives you the latest Kali Linux news and tutorials, gives you the latest release, what is in that release, and gives you a lot of documentation which will help you understand what tools have been developed and what functionality has been given in the latest version. If you want to download, you can directly go here and you can download Kali Linux. Now, Kali Linux is a 2.6 gigabyte download, so it's going to take time, the latest version being 2019.4. And we click over here. I'm using a download manager to manage all these huge downloads, and you can see it's pointed to the operating systems folder, and it is going to be a 2.57 GB download. So we click on download, and in the background, you can see this is going to be downloaded, and we're going to minimize this. And it will take a few minutes for that to download, but this is an ISO image, so we need to install it on a virtual machine. So what we need is we need to use a hypervisor which will allow us to create virtual machines. So we can either use VMware Workstation, which you can download from here. However, this is paid version, so you can see It is around $250 or something for this software, but it is a very good software to have. So if we click on download now, it is going to start the download. It's a 30-day trial period if you want to use it. After 30 days, you'll need to enter the key, which you will get after purchasing the software. If you do not want to utilize this, the free version that you have, you can either download VMware Player, but there are some limitations for VMware Player that you might want to look at. You want to compare these products before you want to purchase them, right? Otherwise, you can download Oracle VirtualBox, which is a free hypervisor. It's not as robust as VMware Workstation, but it does the trick, right? So the free version 6.1 is free, and you can then create your own virtual machines over there and install operating systems on them. What I I already have a VMware Workstation installed, so I'm just going to open that up, and that's my VMware Workstation. As you can see, I already have a lot of virtual machines created over here. What we are going to do is we are going to configure a virtual machine for the Kali Linux operating system that we are downloading, which should be somewhere here. Let's see, it's at 43%, so halfway there. Till then, let's create the virtual machine. So I click on File, create a new virtual machine. I'm going to customize the machine, so click on Next. This default, we don't want to change that, and then we want to install the operating system later. We don't want to point it out right now, so I'll just click on I will install the operating system later. Click on Next. We want to install Linux. Now in the drop down you would not see Kali Linux over here. However, you can choose Ubuntu 64-bit. That's what I'm going to choose. There it is. Next. What is the name that we want? I want to give it Kali Linux without the typo, and I want to store it in one of the folders that I've created. By default it stores on the C drive, which is not a good place to store. You don't want to run out of space on your C drive. So I'm going to click on this PC, and this is my data, and in here I'll have a folder called VirtualBox or virtual machines. There it is, within which you can see the other softwares that I already created. I'm going to create a new folder and call it Kali 2019 L. L for is latest for me, because you can see I already have a Kali Linux. So I'm just going to identify this folder with the L at the end. Going to select it and click on OK. You can see the path being changed over here. Click on Next. It's going to ask you how many processors. Now depending on the processor that you have, you can see I've got an 8-core i7. So if I give it 16 cores or 16 processors, that's not going to work. I cannot go beyond what the physicality already is. So for this machine, one processor with 1 core is more than enough. If you're going to use a lot of tools at the same time, you might just want to give it 2 cores. So we're giving it 2 cores. It will ask us for RAM to be provided for this virtual machine. By default 2048 megabytes, that's 2 GB of RAM is more than enough. If you require more, we can change this later on. So click on Next. We want to use NAT for now. Leave this default. Next. Whatever is recommended, keep it the way it is. We do not want to change it. Next. Create a new virtual hard disk for this machine, and it is going to ask us the size. 20 GB is more than fine. Store it as a single file. We don't want to use multiple file options. Click on Next, and then click on Browse, where we want to store the VMDK file or the virtual hard disk file. And we go back again to the same folder that we had created, virtual machines, and we look at the Kali Linux, Kali 2019 L, and we want to store the VMDK file over there. Once we save it, we want to click on Next, and then we want to click on Finish. So this is the virtual machine that has been created right here, right? Now this is the basic configuration. Now where are we at with the operating system? And you can see the operating system has been downloaded, and it is stored in this particular folder. So we go to E drive. So we are looking for the operating system that we have downloaded. We downloaded it in the operating systems folder, and if we go in here, you can see the current one, the Kali Linux 2019.4 ISO right here. So what we do, we go back to the Kali Linux machine that we have created, edit virtual machine settings, and we point this virtual machine using the CD DVD, and then we point the ISO, the one that we downloaded over here. So we go back to E drive, we go back to OS, and we click on Kali Linux 2019, click on Open. So now when this boots up, it will boot up with this ISO, and then it will allow us to install the operating system. So click on OK. Then we click on Power on this virtual machine. It will start powering on. It will boot to the ISO, and it will start giving us the booting options. So I'm just going to enter the full screen mode over here for this to be better visible. And we don't want the live mode. What we want is we want to use the graphical install. And then we highlight that, we press enter, and you can see the setup starting up. We'll wait for the GUI to pop up. There it is. Which language do we want? For now we want English. click on continue. Where are we located? Click on continue. And the configure your keyboard. We want the US keyboard, American English. Continue. It is going to detect the hardware. So as you can see on the screen, it's attempting auto configuration for most of these settings. The network with DHCP, it has identified the network cards, hardware like the processor that has been provided. Now it is asking for a host name. We're going to leave it at default. We're going to click on continue. Domain name, I'm not joining this into a domain as yet. This is going to be a standalone machine, so I can leave this blank. Click on continue. Now it is going to configure the network. It is asking for a password at this point in time, the root password. Type in any password that you want. Ensure that you remember the password. Now by default, the username for the account is the word root. We are just creating the password for the root account. And then we want to click on continue. Setting up the clock, looking at the hard disks. Now here it asks us, do we want to use the entire disk, the 20 GB virtual hard disk that we had provided, or do we want to give it a manual configuration or a guided one where we want encryption and a logical volume management coming into the picture. We're just going to use the first option, guided use entire disk. Don't worry, it's only going to use the virtual disk that we had created. Click on continue. It will give us that it's a 21.5 GB VMware virtual disk that we had. And click on continue. All files in one partition, that's what we want, recommended for new users, whatever it is. We don't want to change these folders. Continue. And this is what we have configured. Once we click on continue, it is going to say, are you sure you want to make these changes? Click on yes. Click on continue, and it will start installing Kali Linux on your device. Now this is going to take a few minutes for the installation to work. Alright, so that's the installation that's completed. Now it's asking us to configure a package manager. A network mirror can be used to supplement the software that is included on the installation media. This may also make newer versions of software available. Do you want to use a network mirror? We can click no for now and then click on continue. Now this is going to install the grub bootloader. This might take a few minutes as well. Install the grub loader to the master boot record. Yes. Click on continue. Click the hard disk that you have just utilized. This is the one. Click on continue. It will install the grub bootloader, running through the last phases of the installation. And now it says the installation is complete. We want to click on continue, finishing the installation, and then it will do a reboot. Alright, and you can see this is starting up. So we are going to you just wait out the boot, and now it started the booting sequence. Just going to maximize the screen. And you can see it's asking me for the password. This is the one that we created. Now that's not the password, that's the username, that's the root, and the password that we had created at that point in time. And then click on login. And this is your screen. Now what we need to do here is we need to install VMware tools, which will help us manage the screen and help the virtual machine to be a little bit better integrated on the system. So that's not mounted yet, so we're just waiting for it to mount. There it is. And what we want to do here is open VMware Tools Upgrader. Alright, so what we want is we want to extract, or we want to use this Open X Archiver, and once we do that, we'll see the VMware install.pl. Double click on that. Alright, we've got the VMware tools here. What I've done is we have extract to, and I've extracted that on the desktop, right? So what we just did was click on the desktop over here, open, and this is what it will do. And click on extract. Now the error is happening because I've already extracted this. Open this up. We want to run this VMware install.pl. So what do? We open up the terminal window, which is the command line interface over here. And now this is where some of the commands come into the picture. So for example, pwd, it will show us the present working directory. ls will show us the list of the folders that are there. So the folder that we have is on our desktop. So we'll just change directory to desktop, press enter, do an ls, that will show us the list, and you can see VMware tools distrib. That's the folder that we have right here. Right, so we want to go into that folder, cd VMware. At this point, you can just click on tab and it will populate everything over there. Press enter, do an ls, and we want the VMware-install.pl to be executed. Alright, so we tried executing that command. We had an error over there. So what we need to do is we need to execute this command. So /VMware -install.pl, and it will start creating. Now it will ask you for your input installing VMware tools. In which directory do you want to install the binary files? By default it is going to use /usr/bin. If I just press enter, it is going to use the default. As you can see, the input over here. What directory do you want the init directories? I'm just going to press keep on pressing enter for the defaults to come in. This part does not exist. It is going to create it. Default yes, defaults everywhere, and then it tries to start initializing it to maximize the screen, and this is where it is installing. And you can see by just installing that, it automatically adjusted the screen, and now we got a full screen of Kali Linux right here. Right, and that is what VMware Tools does for us once we have installed the operating system. And now you can see the entire screen. On here you will see the tool sets that are given here. Now, why are we using Kali Linux in the first place? Because this comes in with a bundle of thousands of softwares that are ready to be utilized for ethical hacking. Right, and they have been categorized over here for information gathering, vulnerability analysis, web application analysis, and so on and so forth. So you can see from forensics onwards, reporting tools, and as you scroll down, you can see your development tools, graphics coming in, internet, and the system configuration coming into the picture. These are your settings for your operating system. So these are basically your tools. We are right now on the favorites. If I click on information gathering, you will see that other tools for information gathering start appearing over here. For vulnerability analysis, we have got Sparta, Nmap, fuzzing tools, web application analysis, we have got comics, Kipfish, SQL map, database assessments, password attacks, and so on and so forth. So if you just go in the favorites, this was the terminal emulator that we utilized. This is the command line that we saw. We used the cd command. We use the pwd command. We did the ls command as well to give us the list of the directory that we are in. Similarly, there would be commands like cat. So let's go to cd downloads. Let's see what's there. You can see this case sensitive. So if I type in a capital D and then do a tab ls, there's nothing over here on download. So cd ... will take us back one directory. Now you can see we are back from downloads to root. If I want to go to desktop, this is how I go to desktop. Do a ls, you can see the VMware tools folder over there, cd VMware tools, and we go into that folder ls, where it will give us the list of all those files. Now you can see install is a file that we had edited back then. So if I do a cat install, you will see the cat basically is the command that will help us look at the contents of the file, all right, without opening up the file or without editing the file. So you can see just if I scroll up, this is where we gave the cat command. It then printed the contents of the file over here, and then it exited and gave me back to a command line right here. Right, now if I want to copy this, cp root desktop VMware install, and if you want to copy it to root downloads and press enter. Now what we are going to do is we are going to see if this file, the install file that we just edited over here, has been copied to the downloads folder. So we are currently in the VMware on the desktop VMware tools district folder. We do a cd ... that takes us down one directory. So we are still in the desktop. Do a cd ... Now you can see we are back in the root, and now we are going to do a cd downloads, do an ls, and you can see the copied file right here. So if I do a cat install, you can see the same content of that file coming in. So these are some of the commands that we would need to learn as we go ahead. The remove command is, let's say we've got install, we do a man rm. Man is the manual page command that gives us the pages with the description of how that particular command is to be utilized. So rm is remove files or directories. Synopsis, the description, the options, -f for force, -i for prompt, -capital I prompt once before removing more than 3 files, and so on and so forth. If you want to exit this, you can press Q to exit, and you come back to this page. So if I say rm install ls, you will see that the install file has now been deleted. So in Windows we use the del command. In Linux it is the rm command. So this is what we wanted to look at, the demo for Kali Linux, how to download it, how to install it, and some of the basic commands that we can utilize. Alright, let's begin with the phishing tutorial. We have the Kali Linux operating system booted up over here. What we are going to do is we are going to open up a tool called SET, Social Engineering Toolkit, which you would find in this option, and that's the tool that we want. It's a command line tool, a menu driven tool. We are going to host a fake Facebook page, and we can see how we can harvest credentials by this kind of an attack. So these are some disclaimers you might want to go through there. Do you want to agree to the terms of service? Yes. Press enter. And that's your social engineering toolkit. And we are talking about a phishing attack which comes under the social engineering attack. So like I said, it's a menu driven tool. So we just have to look at these options and then just type in the number of the option that we want. So we want to do a social engineering attack. So I type in 1. Press enter. In that, it is asking me whether I want a spear phishing attack, a website attack vector. We are going to choose a second option. So I type in 2, press enter, and then it asks me what I want to do. I want to take the third option here, credential harvester attack methodology, and we want to do the third attack. Now it is asking whether we want to use the in-house website templates that it already has, or do we want to clone a site, or do we have a customized site that we have prepared that we want to migrate into this tool. If you're going to do the site cloning option, so we're going to type in 2, press enter, and then it is going to ask me the IP address where it wants to capture and store the credentials. By default, this is the IP address that I'm using, so if I leave it blank, it will take my default IP address. So I'm just going to press enter, and now it is asking me the URL to clone. So I type in https://www.facebook.com. What it is going to do, it is going to connect online, and it is now it has cloned the website, Facebook login.php. The best way to use this attack is that if the username and password form are in the same field or the same page. Regardless, this captures all posts on a website. So you may need to copy www into HTML depending on where your directory structure is. Press return if you understand what we are saying here. So press enter. The social engineering toolkit credential harvest attack is running on port 80. Information will be displayed to you as it arrives. So the site was 71.134, right? The default IP address, and this is where the website is being hosted. Let's check that out. So let me open up a browser on my host machine, and let me point it to the Kali Linux machine that we have just created, 192.168.71.134, and you should see a login to Facebook coming up right here. Looks genuine. It is genuine because we just went online and downloaded this. Let's just have a recap. Let's have an explanation of what we are trying to do. I am trying to host fake Facebook page on my server which has an embedded script in it which is going to do credential harvesting. So the attack here is, let's say if I'm now hosted this, I can craft a fake email, send it across to a victim saying your Facebook account has seen some unforeseen activity, create a hyperlink using HTML coding. Within that, click here to access your account and verify that the account is secured. And when they click on that link, they will be redirected to my fake page, which is here. You can see the IP address is my virtual machine's IP address, but I'm seeing a Facebook login page, and I'm going to type in someone@somewhere.com, and the password I'm just going to type in the regular ones that I use. And if you see it, when we typed in the username and password, the page just refreshed and gave us the login page again. But now if you look at the URL, I'm actually on Facebook's login page, which is exactly the same that I was hosting. So a layman wouldn't probably figure out they've been hacked by now. They just would figure out, okay, they probably typed in the incorrect password and the page refresh or something like that, and they're just going to log in and they're actually going to access the Facebook page. Thus, they might not even realize that something went wrong. But if I go back to my virtual machine, you can see that it has captured some data and it is reporting over here of what has happened. So if I just scroll up, let's see what happened here and if we have been able to capture anything. So we got a hit printing the output. This is the HTTP 1.1.200. Okay, response coming in, password field found, and we're just looking. There it is. Email someone@somewhere.com, and password that I typed in ASD@1234. So it has captured the username and the password right here. Once we are done, I mean, this is the way attackers work. Now, this is a very basic attack. Again, in the actual trainings, you would then look at how you would host this on a real website, make it a global attack. Right now, it's a virtual machine with a class C IP address. So here, the thought process is, where can we get a free hosting where we can host this kind of sites? Maybe I'll have to purchase a domain which looks like similar to Facebook or the victim that I'm trying to attack. So this is just a POC. So we just wanted to find out if we can, how phishing is done. And this is exactly how it is done, right? So pressing Control C would exit this tool and takes you back to the actual menu. Press 99 to exit, and there it is. Close the window, and that's the phishing practical. After phishing, let's talk about SQL injection. SQL injection stands for structured query language injection, which is a database attack, though it resides within the application. So it's the application vulnerability that we are trying to look at to try to bypass authentication. As the name suggests, a SQL injection vulnerability allows an attacker to inject malicious input into a SQL statement. What is a SQL statement? A query that is used by an application and is fired off to the database. Database executes that query, gets that information that is required, and sends it back to the user if the user is authenticated. So we're going to look at the SQL injection attack demo here. And what we are going to do is we are going to go back to our VMware workstation. And I've got a tool over here called OWASP, Broken Web Application, which is a utility that has been created for people like us to test our skills, to learn on how we can develop our skills further. So this has a lot of vulnerable applications built within it. We're just going to try to access it, and we're going to see if we can create a SQL injection attack. Just waiting for it to boot up. Once it boots up, it will give us an IP address. There we are. So we need to connect to 71.132. So I can just use the same browser I was using, close up Facebook, and now go to 192.168.71.132. And this is the OWASP Broken Web Application project. What we're going to do is we're going to go to Utility, and this is an application that has a lot of information within it. You can see it gives you links about what you should do, help me, video tutorials, listing of vulnerabilities that they have, and so on and so forth. So you can see we are not logged in right now. I'm just going to do this as a demo. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at this and bypass authentication. So we are taken to the login page where you need a username and password to log in. I'm going to type in test as the username and test as the password. Click on login, and you can see that account does not exist, so the authentication mechanism works. Now what we want to do is we want to create a query. Now what does a query look like? When I type in a username and a password, if I just type in a single quote here, it is going to create an error, and this is what a SQL query looks like. Select username from accounts where username is a single quote, and then the exception error happened, so it's not showing the rest of the query to us. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to craft a query here, single quote, and give it a condition or 1 equals 1 space hyphen space. What happens, hyphen space is comments out anything after that. So the password field is being commented out at this point in time, and I'm just giving it a condition where the condition is true. 1 does equal 1. And if this condition is true, it is going to allow me to log in. So you can see right now we are not logged in. This bypasses the authentication mechanism, and you can see user authenticated, and we are now logged in as admin. So in the training, what we need to understand as a whole is how SQL works, what are the queries that are structured with, how you can, what are the testing operators. Now, the single quote that we used, that was an operator in the SQL syntax, what these operators are, how they function, and then how you can leverage these attacks. There are different tools that are given to you in Kali as well that you can utilize. So in Kali Linux, you can just open up a command prompt, and there's a tool called SQL map. You need to give it a particular site. So SQL map -u for the URL and whatever the URL is. Now URL here, and then once you're here, you just press the enter key. This tool will craft all the queries in the background for you. You don't even have to know SQL query or SQL languages. This is a very easy tool to utilize. Sadly, I cannot demo this on a live website because that would be illegal, but you can see how you can operate this yourself. That's what SQL injections are all about. Moving on, we now talk about VPNs, virtual private networks. And a virtual private network is basically a secure network that allows me to anonymize myself over the internet. So what I'm doing is I'm connecting from here to a server that encrypts my channel, encrypts my connection, and thus allows me to keep my data secure. Now, the basic essence of a VPN or a virtual private network is to allow me this encryption mechanism where I can encrypt and safeguard my data. The added advantage that nowadays a VPN gives is that they can allow us to spoof our IP address or obfuscate our IP address so we can actually become anonymous on the internet. It can allow us to use multiple IP addresses and thus secure ourselves on the internet. For example, I use VPN called CyberGhost. And what this allows me to do is it allows me so many servers over here. If you look at the entire list, all the servers, then there are no spy servers, which guarantee me that they are not going to keep and store any logs. And thus, they are not going to record any of the activity that I'm doing. right? Since they are located out of Romania, this becomes a little bit more safer for me because the government and the laws over there are a little bit more relaxed than other countries. They give me different links for torrenting, for streaming, for connection features. So there are a lot of VPNs out there. So for example, let's go to the website cyberghost.com. So we can see there's a sale going on, 76% sale, or you can go on to ExpressVPN, which is also a very good VPN. Then there is NordVPN. It depends on what you want and how you want to utilize it. So just purchasing a VPN or getting a free VPN is not enough. It depends on which country the VPN originates from and which server you're connected to. For example, most of the countries have a pact where they share information amongst themselves even if you're connected to a VPN. That means that these companies that provide these services have to generate and store logs, and these logs have to be reported to the government if they ask for it. Now, if there's a list of 14 countries that actually focuses on this practice, so you have to find out VPN that and a server that is not a part of those 14 countries and ensure that those logs are not going to be reported to the government. And these are 3 VPNs basically are something that which are good, and I personally use CyberGhost. I've used the others. I just keep on rotating them just to get an idea of which one is better. So these are VPNs that can allow you to anonymize yourself on the internet. Moving on, these are the ones that we talked about. There are others: Safer VPN, Hide My Ass, ExpressVPN, and so on and so forth. From our terminologies, let's now talk about VPS. VPS is basically virtual private server, where you can rent a service or server as a service, a virtual machine as a service. So basically on a cloud using infrastructure as a service, you can rent a server and utilize it for whatever activity you want. So let's go to these sites: register.com, GoDaddy, Network Solutions, or we can talk about other cloud solutions as well. So here you can get register your domain names. So in the previous exercise, for let's say when we talked about the phishing exercise, what we want is we can go on to register.com or we can go on to GoDaddy.com and we can purchase a particular domain. For example, something like this. Instead of the O's, I'm typing in a couple of zeros for the Facebook and let's see if anything of that is available. Now something.photo is available, or facetips.com is available. There are other options that are making over here that they're giving us over here. And once we purchase this, we can then have our own hosting with a web hosting as a service. And we can have a Linux-based hosting or a Windows-based hosting depending on what you want, and that's where your shared hosting comes into the picture. If you just want, if you want to look at a virtual server and you want to rent a server over there itself, you can move on to rackspace.com, and here in your services, you can have physical server or a virtual server in a public cloud. Your other cloud providers, for example, would be Amazon, AWS, and on AWS, you can basically look at EC2, Elastic Compute Cloud, which is basically virtual servers in the cloud. And over here, you can rent out a server with whatever capacity you require. You'll obviously have to pay the rent for what those servers are going to cost. But once you have those servers, you can then launch any services on top of it. Looking at other services that we have, we talked about Tor. Tor is a onion routing software that allows users to browse the web anonymously. So we can just go online and we can try to spoof our identity, and I'm going to show you how. So I've got a VMware workstation right here, so we're just going to pull that up and we're going to power on a Windows 7 machine where we're going to look at the onion routing. So our Windows machine has booted up. We're just going to log in, and this is my Windows 7 machine. Now I've got a Chrome browser right here, and we're going to go to a website called seemyip.com, which is going to give the IP address that I'm currently using. So right now I'm not connected to any VPN or anything, and you can see that's my IP address that I'm utilizing. Now if I want to anonymize myself, what I'm going to do is I am going to use Tor, and that's the Tor browser that's set up right there. If I click on it, it's going to open up the software and it's going to create a new network, and it's going to connect to the Tor network and allow me to anonymize myself. Right, so that's the Tor browser opening up and giving me a new browser over here. So I've got one, which is the old one, which is my current IP address. If I just refresh that, you'll see that I'm still on the same IP address as far as this browser is concerned. there's a refresh and it's still showing me the same IP address. Where if I go on to Tor right now and if I go to cmyip.com, you will see that it is going to give me, and you can see the amount of time it is taking to reach that site. That's because I am using a VPN and there's a lot of encryption running off, and you can see now I'm certainly connected via Hong Kong. And even to reach this site, what Tor does is it gives me a proxy chain. A proxy chain is where it creates multiple hops to hide my identity, and before I reach cmyip.com, I am using 3 different IP addresses over here, one in France, one in Germany, and one in Hong Kong. So if I do something over here to trace back my steps to my actual IP address, the law enforcement agencies or anyone who's going to search, like a forensic investigator, would have to go through these IP addresses before they come back to me. Now, it's not impossible, but the effort and time that's going to be taken to come across 3 different countries is going to be phenomenal. So it may just defeat the purpose of having so much resources spent to identify who did what. So that's what Tor does for us. Alright, moving on from Tor, we are going to look at keyloggers. Keyloggers are basically softwares that run in the background and record all the keystrokes of the user. So if I've got a keylogger installed right now, whatever I type will be stored in a text file for the hacker so that they can look at it later on. And just to give you an example of that, we go back to my VMware workstation and we open up another Windows 7 machine. I'm going to power this on and I'm going to close this one till then. So this virtual machine has booted up. We are going to use user 1, log in as user 1, just close all these softwares which are not required. And once this machine is booted up, what we're going to do is I'm just going to open up a random websites and see what we're doing. Basically, there's a keylogger that's there in the startup that's going to record our keystrokes. And we just want to see what it actually does. Now, Firefox is getting updated, so let's hold on. Now, this is the latest version of Firefox, right? And we're just going to go to, let's say, facebook.com. Wait for the website to open up. Alright, let's try opening it up again. And that's facebook.com. And we're just going to type in some random username and password someone at somewhere.com, and the password being again asd@1234567890. Login, obviously that login is not going to work. User probably doesn't exist, or if it does, the password probably is incorrect. And so we are going to close this. We're going to, let's say, open up another browser window, go to another site, rediff.com, and then go to rediff mail. Try the same thing over here, someone at somewhere.com, password asd@12345678, whatever it is. Don't say, we can see the combination is incorrect. Now there's a keylogger running in the background, and what we want is we now want to open up the keylogger. Now it is visible here because I've kept it visible. You can hide it in the start menu, and there's a shortcut key for you to pull it up later on. So this completely becomes invisible. And what it can do is it basically creates a record of whatever you have been doing so far. So you can see these things populating on the 25th of December. So if I look at the visited websites, you can see I opened up Mozilla Firefox, the first where there was a problem loading the page. Then we opened up Facebook, then we opened up rediffmail.com, and so on and so forth. So it just gives me the list of visited websites. Whereas if I look at keystrokes and clipboard, you will see whatever we have typed in. So we first typed in facebook.com. Then again, the second time I try to type in, then I hit backspace, then I type in facebook.com, and then you can see I typed in someone at somewhere.com, and in tab asd@1234567890. We closed up the browser, we opened up a new one, and we went on to rediffmail.com, and then you can see me typing this one, then going back one space, then the rest of what I typed, and then the password coming in. So that's what a keylogger does. If you look at the taskbar, it's not going to show you a keylogger running in the background. It's in the processes, you're not going to see anything at all, but it's going to mask itself as a service. So if you look into the properties, you can see that icon coming in over here, which matches this one. And so you can see that this is masking itself as a service.exe. If this gets hidden as well, it would be very difficult for a user to even identify this. Alright, so that's what a keylogger is. Moving on, let's see what else we want to talk about. So we've talked about Tor, we've talked about keyloggers, and now we want to talk about firewalls. Now, for keyloggers to be prevented, we need antiviruses, right? So we need a good antivirus program that's going to be installed, updated, and run on a regular basis to protect ourselves from malwares. But what about network connections? And you need a firewall and a system to prevent or to detect what kind of connections are going on in the first place. Now, we cannot rely on software 100%. So even if a firewall is not configured properly, that's going to be a problem. So what we need to do is we have to have a firewall, configure it correctly, and then allow and disallow certain activity from happening. And what we're going to do is, I've got such a system on my machine here. I use a software called Glasswire. What it does is it is a network analyzer. So it allows me to analyze whatever is going on. You can see all the apps that I'm utilizing and how much upload and download they have been doing, all the traffic. So you can see the protocols that I'm utilizing. So I come to know what's going on in the background. And this gives me the entire graph of how much I have been doing for the past 24 hours, past 3 hours, past 5 minutes, and so on and so forth. Right, so this is what the activities, and these are the alerts that it has been generating. I can click on those alerts and it will start telling me what it was all about. If the graph doesn't work for me, it gives me usage as well. So how much I have utilized since I've installed this software, right? And what applications have been utilized, which hosts have been connected to, and the traffic type that was utilized. And then the things on my network. So these are the devices that I have currently on my network that have been identified. And then comes the firewall. So on the firewall is clicked on. You see all those services that have been identified, and you can just click on a particular service to lock that service. So this becomes a discovery tool, identifies whatever networking is going on, gives me all that information, and then I can look at and I can just click on any of these services that I find it as malicious and block them. I can create different profiles for different applications as and when I want them. And these are the alerts. So you can see that this was the first time a network connection was looked at from VMware. And what this allows me to do is whenever I execute a file, it can upload it to virustotal.com and scan it as a third-party antivirus to ensure that there is nothing malicious on it. So I already have an antivirus over here, but if this ever gets compromised, I still can rely on a third-party service where in real time when I execute my applications, they would be verified and I would be assured that nothing is wrong with my system. And this software that I'm utilizing, Glasswire Basic, is free, and then there are paid versions as well. It's just glasswire.com is where you're going to find this. Moving on, rootkit. Rootkits are also malicious softwares that you allow an unauthorized user to have access to a computer to restrict areas of its software. Now, a rootkit in a sense is a malicious software that infects a machine and prevents some functionality from it, like hiding data or preventing users from running antiviruses. And it's basically a malicious software that is used to hide information from the victim so that they would not realize that they have actually been compromised. It's going to be a difficult showing of a rootkit, so I cannot show that demo to you. So we're just going to move on, and we are going to talk about ethical hacking techniques now. Now, when we say ethical hacking techniques, we want to look at what kind of audits are available when we want to do ethical hacking. So there's a black box audit, a white box audit, and a gray box audit. So if I'm invited in an organization to conduct a test, to conduct a audit, to conduct a vulnerability assessment or a penetration test, to identify vulnerabilities and then try to plug them out, they are going to give me 3 different variations. In a black box audit, they're not going to tell me about the infrastructure. They're not going to give me any information, and they want me to start from the basics of gathering information, identifying the systems, and based on the information that I gather, whether I'm able to develop any hacks and compromise their infrastructure. So it will be a simulation of a hacker who's sitting outside the organization and trying to find a way in. Whereas a white box audit is where full infrastructure knowledge is given, anything and everything that is required for an audit is given. And this is a simulation of an insider attack, a person sitting inside the organization misusing their permissions and then trying to compromise, trying to get access to data that they do not have access to. So the simulation is from a malicious insider. A gray box is where some partial knowledge is available, and from that partial knowledge, you're going to try to build up more information, and then you're going to try to get access to those resources. What are the tools that we utilize? So we've already had a couple of demos on keyloggers, SQL injection, SQL map, and so on and so forth. Metasploit is a very much used tool for penetration testing, and having knowledge on Metasploit is very much necessary as far as ethical hacking is concerned. Nmap, this is a tool used for network discovery. Nessus, a vulnerability scanner. Wireshark is a packet capturer that allows you to capture packets and analyze whatever is going on. SQL map is something that we have seen, a SQL injection attack tool which generates its own queries. And John the Ripper is a password cracking tool. Backtrack used to be an operating system that was utilized for penetration testing. However, Backtrack has now been replaced by something called Kali Linux, and that's the operating system that we have utilized in all our demos, where we try to look at SQL map and those injection attacks that we did. So what are the areas of ethical hacking? We have just talked about all these areas as well. Network services, we looked at the Glasswire application that showed us how my machine is consuming networks, which protocols are being consumed, how the connections are being created. If somebody is able to install a Trojan on my machine, it is going to try to create a new connection on the network with the hacker to allow that hacker a backdoor access. Now, if I have that Glasswire or a similar firewall implemented, it is this firewall that is going to detect it and prevent that connection from happening. So if I install a software that is suddenly suspicious, or that installs something else in the background that I may not be aware of, that tool is going to identify all the connections that are being made, and it is going to highlight that connection. I need to go through all of those connections and identify whether they are legit or not. And if I find some suspicious or doubtful, I'm going to block that connection, and then I'm going to investigate what's going on. And that's where ethical hacking comes into the picture. You want to find out if your firewall that you have implemented is going to work correctly or not. If the configuration of the firewall is done properly, or if the firewall is misconfigured, is it leaking out information, right? At the same time, you're looking at web applications. We looked at the OWASP broken web application where we did some SQL injection attacks, right? So that was a weakness or a vulnerability in that application, which would allow us to bypass authentication and get access to resources that we were not authorized for. And then client-side attacks would be where you install keylogger at the end of the client system, and then you try to capture whatever data the user is typing in, like usernames and passwords on the Facebook and the rediffmail.com website that we saw, and then try to misuse that information to get access to those resources. Then Wi-Fi networks, right? Wi-Fi is something that we use on a regular basis. We got our smart devices nowadays, smartphones, tablets, phablets, that we can connect to Wi-Fi and start using all our services, our banking applications on our smartphones. And thus we want to ensure that wireless connectivity is simple and is secured. So you want to use encryption mechanisms, you want to use tools on your smartphones, antiviruses, firewalls on your smartphones to ensure that whatever you are utilizing is going to remain secure. And then social engineering, we've looked at the phishing website on facebook.com. We've seen how easy it is to clone websites and host them on Apache server. So if you look at it as from an ethical hacker's perspective, the job of an ethical hacker is to simulate these kind of attacks that a hacker may conduct. And first of all, you're basically going to find out areas where these attacks can happen. Think of it from a hacker's perspective. Try to simulate those attacks and see if those attacks are going to be effective. Can those attacks be prevented? And can your current security controls that you have put in place identify, detect, and prevent these attacks from happening in the first place? And that is what ethical hacking is all about. Let's look at the Metasploit attack. Metasploit is a framework of penetration testing that makes hacking very simple. You just need to know how to utilize the tool. You need to identify the vulnerability associated with a particular exploit and then run the exploit on Metasploit. We'll be demoing this during the practical. So there are active exploits and passive exploits. In active exploits, it exploits a specific computer, runs until execution and then exits, uses brute force and exits when an error occurs. In a passive exploit, these exploits wait for incoming requests and exploit them as soon as they connect. They can also be used in conjunction with emails and web browsers. So in passive exploits, we create a payload, like a reverse connection payload, we send it to the victim. Once the victim installs that software, the machine will then initiate a connection to us. Our machine will be in a listen mode, and then we will, once the software is executed at their end, we would then try to connect and exploit that particular vulnerability. This is the practical that we'll be doing on Metasploit. So let's move on with the demos, and then we'll see what we can discuss amongst them. Alright, let's have a look at some of the demos that we had talked about in the ethical hacking and penetration testing module. We are going to look at 3 different demos. The first one is going to be a SQL injection attack that we are going to perform on this tool that we have. The second one is a password cracking attack on Windows 7. And the third one is a MetaBreeder based or a Metasploit based shell shock attack on a Linux based web server. So let's get cracking. I've powered on this virtual machine, which is the OWASP broken web application. It is a tool that is provided for people who want to enhance their skills, and they can practice how to do these attacks in a legal manner. So we are going to go to this site. I'm just going to open up my browser. The IP address is 71.132, and that's the OWASP broken web application that we want to utilize. We are going to head off to Mutility 2, and we are going to look at a SQL injection attack where we want to bypass authentication. Now this takes us to the login screen, so we can just try our luck here and see that the authentication mechanism works. The account does not exist, so the username and password that we have supplied is not the correct one. So we want to ensure that there's a SQL database, and we can try to attack it and see if we can bypass the authentication. Now what we want to do is we want to create a SQL based malformed query that can give us a different output. So I'm just going to type in a single quote over here and type login, and you can see that this is now suddenly recognized as a operator, and there's an error that is given out compared to the login that we tried earlier. When we used a proper text-based login mechanism, it gave us the account does not exist, but here the single quote gave us an error, and it shows us how SQL works. This is the query that we had created. Now in the trainings that you have for ethical hacking, there would be explanations of what these queries are all about, how the syntax works. Here we're just going to see if we can create a malformed query to log in as a user in this case. So what I'm going to do is create the query over here, and we're going to give it a comparison. So we're going to give it a or 1 equals 1 space hyphen space. And if you now click login, you should be able to bypass authentication, and you can see user has been authenticated, and we now have admin access to this application. Now here the SQL queries need to be crafted in such a perspective that they're going to work. So there would be a lot of exercise in identifying what the database is. There's a Microsoft database, an Oracle database, and so on and so forth, and then you have to choose those proper commands. But identifying that would come in the training. Right now we're just looking at a demo. This is how a SQL injection attack works. Now let me log out here. Similarly, now we are in a login page. The same query worked wonders where it allowed us to bypass authentication. So it also depends on what kind of a page I am and what query would be accepted at this point in time. So here application understanding would also come into the picture, where which function we are calling upon when we are connected to a particular page. Now this is a user lookup function, right? So again here we try the same method, test. That's not going to work. Authentication error, bad user on password. And if we type in the same query over here, single quote or, and give it a condition, single quote or 1 equals 1 space hyphen space. Now here it is not going to log us in because this is not a login page. This is a user lookup form. So here it would instead give us a dump of all the databases that it has. So you can see all the usernames and passwords coming in that are stored in the user lookup field. So this is where the understanding comes in of which query to create at what page, depending upon the function that is being called, right? So that's the SQL injection attack that we wanted to look at. Let's move on to password cracking. Now this is a Windows 7 machine that we have. I'm just going to do a very basic password cracking example. We're just going to log in. Now here the assumption is that we are able to log in. We have access to a computer, and we want to check out other users who are using this computer and see if we can find out their passwords, so that we can log in as a different user, steal data if required, and we wouldn't be to blame if there are any logs that are created. So here we've got a tool called Enable that is installed right here. Now I'm already an administrator on this machine. I'm checking out other administrators who share the same privileges, or any other user who may be on this system whose password I can crack, and thus I would be able to get access through their account and then do any malicious activity, right? So this allows me to go into a cracker tool, and it allows me to enumerate this machine and identify all the users and passwords that are there in this particular machine. Right? So I'm just going to click on the plus sign, and I'm going to import hashes from a local system. So where are these files stored? Where does Windows store its passwords? In what format are they stored? And what this tool does to retrieve those? That's something that we all need to know as an ethical hacker, right? So import the hashes from the local system. Click on next. It's going to enumerate that file, and it is going to give you a list of all the users that are there. So you can see the users are hacker admin, test, the one that we are logged in as, and then there's a user called virus as well. And you can see that this is the hash value of the password that is being utilized. Now there's a particular format for a hash value for Windows and how it stores. But once we have these hash values, let's say if I want to crack this password, there are various attacks that we can do. For example, a dictionary based attack or a brute force attack. Let's try a brute force attack, right? NTLM is the hashing mechanism that is used by Windows. So we're going to try to create an NTLM hash attack. and here we are going to use a predetermined rule set. For example, we are not sure what characters are being utilized over here, so we just create an attack like this using all characters and lowercase a through z, uppercase a through z, numeric 0 through 9, and all the special characters. Let's say the password is between 7 and 16 characters. And this is the character set that we want to try the brute force attack on. What is a brute force attack? It is an attack where the computer is going to try each and every permutation and combination out of this character set and try to figure out if the password is going to be correct. So if we click start, it's going to start with a particular characters, and then it is going to identify if that NTLM hash is going to work against this character. And you can see the time is going to be phenomenal over here. So it's not necessary that this attack would be viable. It will be 100% successful given the time frame. However, the time frame is huge enough for this attack to become a little bit redundant. There are other attacks that we can do which can easily videos. So that's how we can get access to users and passwords. There are different mechanisms where, let's say we don't have login access, then what are we going to do? How we can create a fake user, login, or how we can remotely access a machine and then try to get the same access. And that is what we are going to try to do in the next demo on a Linux machine. So what we are doing in a Linux machine could also be doable on the Windows machine with a different exploit. So what I'm going to do is, this is the Linux web server that I have that I'm going to power on. I'm going to use a Kali Linux machine to hack that device, and I'm going to just power off my Windows 7 machine. Give it a minute till it boots up. Now this is also a demo machine that we have which has its own pre-configured vulnerabilities. So here we'll cite shell shock vulnerability affects Linux, Mac and Unix based operating systems for a particular version of the bash shell. Bash is the born again shell, which is the command line interface in these operating systems. So what we are trying to do here is we are going to use the Kali Linux machine, try to find out the vulnerability over here, and if it exists, we are going to use Metasploit to attack this machine. Now the first and foremost thing is we want to identify the IP address. We have no idea what the IP address is. We are in the same subnet, so we are assuming that we are able to connect to this machine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up a tool called ZenMap. I'm going to open up a command line interface, find out what my IP address is, and my IP address is this with a subnet mask of 255.255.255.0. So I want to see if there are any other machines that are live in the same subnet, and we are doing a ping sweep over here to identify which machines are 3, 254 and 128. We know that we are 128 at this point in time, 250 that we want to look at, and let's then try to see if we can scan that machine. 130 are running over there, and if it is whether the pen test machine that we were looking for. Give us the ports that are open and the details about those ports, and somewhere here it will tell us that this is the pen tester lab machine that we wanted, which is correct. So now we want to do a vulnerability analysis on this. What we are going to do is I'm going to use another GUI based tool called Sparta, which I can just find out from here. Sparta uses two tools in the background, a Nmap tool and a tool called Nikto. So we're just going to start scanning. 192.168.71.133 was the IP address. Add to scope, and over a period of time you can see all of these will start populating with information. There we are. That's the Nikto tool coming in, scanning on port 80, which means that it's a web server using HTTP. It tells us it's an Apache HTTPD 2.2.21, and gives us the 22 port number as well. If we head over to the tab of Nikto, or let's look at the screenshot first. This is what the website will be looking like, and Nikto gives us the options over here. It tells us that there is a vulnerability over here for shell shock, and this is the path where the vulnerability is going to minimize all these other windows, and we are going to open up Metasploit. Metasploit is a penetration testing tool that is used by most hackers and ethical hackers to test applications, and already around 1700 exploits right here. We are going to see all those exploits with these commands. There we are, sorry for the typo. And it will just give us a list of all the exploits that are stored in Metasploit in this version. So all of these are Windows based. If we scroll up, we will be looking at other vulnerabilities as well, or exploits, the Unix based exploits, Linux, OS X, multi-exploits. And we are looking for a exploit for multi-based Apache, or looking for Apache mod CGI bash environmental executable. So what we're going to do is we're just going to copy it, go back to the bottom, say use exploit, and paste the one that we wanted. Press enter. Say show options. So it will ask us to configure this. I'm just going to configure it based on the knowledge that we have. Set our host, which is the remote host, the victim's machine. So we put in the IP address. It asks us for the target URI. So that's the path that we saw. Set target URI to cgi-bin/status. Enter. Now with the exploit, we need to find a payload that is going to give us the output that we want. So we say show payloads, and it will give us a list of all the compatible payloads with this exploit. And we want to create a reverse TCP connection, which is this. So we know it's a Linux operating system. We want this payload to be set. So set payload, press enter. That's the payload coming in. Show options. Now that we have set the payload, this is the options for the exploit, and now we want to set our options for the payloads as well. So we are creating a reverse TCP connection to our machine, which means we need to set up a listener. So I need to put my IP address over here, set localhost or lhost 192.168.71, ensure everything is fine, which looks like it is, and we then type in the word exploit so that it will start this attack. I can see that it has created a meterpreter session at the victim side, and it has opened up a session. So if I do a pwd, now pwd is a Linux command for present working directory, and it will show us that we'll connect it to var cgi-bin. Do an ls, it will list all the files. That's the status file over there. Do a cd /, it will take us to the root of this machine. Now remember, we saw the passwords on a Windows machine. Similarly, we can head over to the cd shadow. Now psswd is the file where Linux stores its usernames, and shadow is the file where passwords are shown. So do a cat command, psswd, and you can see these users coming up. So you can see the last user, Pentest Lab, and you can see there are no passwords. So let's do a cat shadow, and that's your hash value for the password that you stand, and we need to create based on the vulnerabilities that exist on different machines. So if we just looked at Windows and Linux and how we can exploit them depending on existing vulnerabilities. As an ethical hacker, this is what we need to learn in our trainings, and then we need to clear our exams based on this knowledge of how these things, the penetration testing jobs. So let's begin with what is SQL injection. As the name suggests, SQL injection vulnerability allows an attacker to inject malicious query language, which is a language used by an application to interact with a database. Now, normally this attack is targeted towards a database to extract the data that is stored within. However, the vulnerability does not lie in the database itself. The vulnerability will always lie in the application. It is the developer's prerogative of how to develop the application, how to configure it to prevent SQL injection queries from happening. A database is created to answer questions, and if a question is asked, it is supposed to answer it. Database needs to be configured for some amount of security, but the vulnerability, the flaw here for SQL injection will always lie in the application itself. It is how the application interacts with the database that needs to be modified, that needs to be maintained by the developer rather than just configuring the database itself. So the attacker at this point in time, when they send a query to the application, will form a malformed query by injecting a particular command or an operator that is recognized by the SQL language. And if that operator is passed through the application to the database, then the database basically gets cracked or does a data dump because of that unwanted character coming in. So this character needs to be filtered at the application level itself. Now, let's look at a quick demo. So what we have done here is I have this virtual machine called OWASP Broken Web Applications Virtual Machine version 1.2. I'm going to power this on. Till this powers on, I'm going to show you where we can download this utility from. So you can just look for OWASP Broken Web Application Project download. You'll find it on sourceforge.net. Click on the link. You can download the Broken Web Application Project from here. This is a 1.9 GB download, and you can have a zip machine directly for VMware or Oracle VirtualBox. Now, this is an application that has been developed by OWASP, which stands for Open Web Application Security Project, which is a not-for-profit organization, and periodically releases the most top 10 risks that an application will face for that particular year. So they have given a web application with inbuilt vulnerabilities for professionals like us to practice upon, to develop our skills upon, because doing this in the real world is illegal. I cannot go onto a website to demonstrate how a SQL injection attack works. Neither should you try your hands on it till you become very well rehearsed with it. So to upgrade your skills, to upskill yourself, please download this machine, host it in a VMware workstation or an Oracle virtual box, and you can then try your skills on it, right? So just going back to the browser here, if I open up a new tab, you'll see that this machine has booted up and has an IP address called 71.132. So if I just go onto that IP address and I type in 192.168.71.132, and you'll see the OWASP Broken Web Application project, and there are a lot of training applications, realistic intentionally vulnerable applications, old versions of real applications, and so on and so forth. So there is a lot of applications inbuilt over here that you can try your skills upon. We are going to try to use the OWASP Mutilidae over here. This gives you the OWASP top 10 risks for 2010, 2013. 2017 is the latest one so far, but the difference between 2013 and 2017 is that some of these have changed, but not all of them. The order has changed a little bit, but you can see that SQL injection is on the top A1 amongst the injection attacks, right? And you can see there are multiple types that have been given here: the SQL injection for extracting data, or SQL injection for bypass authentication, or insert your injection attacks, blind SQL injection. And then there is a tool called SQL Map, which is available freely on your Linux machines, Kali Linux or Parrot Linux, whichever you want to use for your practice targets, and so on and so forth. So if I just take you here for bypass authentication, and this is a regular login page that an application may have, right? You look at a username, you look at password, you type that in, and you log in. So let's say I don't know a password here. I'm just going to type in the username test. Password is PASSWORD. I try to log in, and it shows me that the account does not exist. So the authentication mechanism does work. I did type in a username and password. It wasn't recognized, so the account does not exist. Now let's try to type in a SQL query. Here I'm going to just give it a single quote, which is an operator that is recognized by the SQL language, which when the database tries to execute will cause the database to dump some data or to bypass authentication in this case. And I'm going to give it a condition, single quote, or 1 equals 1 space hyphen space, and I'm going to click on login. Now right now I'm not logged in at all, and we tried our username and password and we weren't able to log in. So now if I log in, you will see that it gave me a status update saying the user has been authenticated, and I'm logged in as admin, got root. So that is what these SQL queries can achieve. I'm going to log out right now, and we are going to look at the basics of SQL injection. So looking at that small demo, now let's look at what types of SQL injections are available. So the first is in-band SQL injection. There are two subtypes within in-band: error-based injection attack and a union-based injection attack. The second type is blind SQL injection attack, where there's a Boolean-based and a time-based attack. And the third one is out-of-bound SQL injection attack. Now, what is in-band SQL injection attack? In-band is where we are either attempting the error-based or the union-based. What is error-based? We send a query to the database, we craft a query to the database, and it generates an error message, and it dumps the error message right in front of us on the screen. That makes us realize that there is a flaw, and there is some information that is dumped on the screen, which we can then further utilize to craft our further queries as we go ahead. Whereas union-based is it is where we combine multiple statements at the same time. So if you look at the URL, earlier in the URL, you would see a large structure in that URL. We can try to add two or more statements within the URL itself to combine them and then confuse the database into executing both the statements together and giving a data dump at the same time, right? So what would an error-based SQL injection look like? If I go back to the same database, which is here, right? And if you remember the username, we gave it a single quote or 1 = 1 space hyphen space. We gave it the condition, right? So basically what it did was this, a single quote is an operator that goes to the database, selects the default table in the user tables in this database column, and then compares it to the condition that is given. So the condition that we gave was 1 = 1, which is always true. So what it did was it selected the default user table that was available in the database, and instead of comparing it to a password, it compared it to the condition. So if I give it 1 = 2 where the condition is false, and if I log in, you will see that the account doesn't exist, comes back again because the condition was false. And instead of comparing the user account to the password, it basically compared the user account to the condition. So if I give it a single quote or 1 = 1 hyphen space and log in, you can see that this is a correct condition, and thus we are able to log in. Now, before we even go to that extent, if I just forget the condition over here and I just give it a single quote, the operator, and I send this operator to the database and I click on login, you will see that it generates an error which is right on top, and it tells us the line, the file where the error happened, and you can see it happened in the mysql handler.php file, right? And then it gives us the message, you have an error in your SQL syntax, check the manual that corresponds to your MySQL server version for the right syntax to use. Now, why would a hacker want to do this in the first place? Because there are different types of databases. So there is a MySQL, MS SQL or Microsoft SQL, Oracle SQL, IBM DB2. All of these are variations of the SQL database. They use the SQL language. However, every database has its own command, right? They have their own syntax, they have their own specific commands that are utilized for the database. So in this scenario, the hacker wants to identify what database is being currently utilized so they can craft those particular queries. So now with this injection, with just me sending the quote and the error getting generated, I now come to know that we are using a MySQL server, and the version of that server is 5.1.73, and the rest of the information about where the handlers are located and so on and so forth, right? This gives the information to the hacker of how they want to proceed next, what kind of queries they want to create, what kind of syntax they want to utilize. So error-based attack is where you generate these kind of errors and you get this information. The union-based is where you craft your queries within the URL. You can try to combine multiple statements within the input fields and try to generate a response from that. Then we come to Boolean-based SQL injection. Sends a SQL query to the database, which forces the application to return a different result depending on whether the query returns a true or a false result. So basically, if the input is false, both the inputs are false, the output would be false. There's one input that is false, the other input that is true, input B, the output would be true, and so on and so forth, right? So depending on the result from the inputs, the attacker will come to know which input is true. With this, he can then access the database of the website. So you're trying to figure out by sending out multiple inputs and then analyzing the output to see what exactly, which command exactly worked, what was the resultant output of that command. Thus, from this kind of an information, the hacker can infer their next step forward. Then you have time-based SQL injections. Now, there are times when a database administrator or an application administrator has done some security configuration and thus have disabled verbose error messages. Now, what is a verbose error message? The error message that we saw right here is a verbose error message. That means that the message gives out details. The message gives out details about what the database is, the version and whatnot. So if they have sanitized these errors and you no longer can generate these errors and thus you cannot figure out what database is, then what do you do, right? For example, if I just take you to Simplilearn and take you to a URL that is supposedly not accessible, you can see that it gives a generic error. Oops, like it looks like you have crash landed on Mars. It doesn't give you a verbose error that we saw here. So this gives us a detailed error of what went wrong, where it gives us the database, the version of the database, and where the query went wrong, and etc, etc, etc. Whereas on this site, where there's a lot of security that goes in here, so you can see that it doesn't generate a error. It just get a generic page in front of you. So in that case, what does a hacker do? So the hacker then injects a time-based query in the URL, which allows us to verify whether the command is being executed or not. So we put in a time wait, let's say 10 seconds of time wait. So if the moment we inject the query, if the query times for 10 seconds and then gets executed, that means that the SQL injection is possible. However, if we inject the query and it just gets executed without the delay, that means that the time injection attack would not be possible on that particular site. Out of bound is not a very common attack. It depends on the features being enabled on the database management system that is being used by the web application. So this can be a somewhat of a misconfiguration error by the database administrator, where you have enabled functions and not sanitized them. So you have not done in access controls properly. You have not given account control. So queries should never be executed at an administrative level. They should always be executed at a user level with minimum privileges that are required for that query to be executed. Now, if you're allowing these kind of functions to be enabled at the DBMS, and there is an administrative account that can have access to them, at that point in time an out of bound injection attack is possible. So let's look at how a website works, right? How SQL works on a website. Now the website is constructed of HTML, hypertext markup language, which would include JavaScripting for functionality, cascading style sheets for the mapping of the website, right? And then React JS and whatnot for further functionality. Now, when we send a query to the website, it is normally using the HTTP protocol or HTTPS protocol. When the query reaches the application would then go ahead and generate the SQL query. At the client side, you'll have all these scripting languages coming in on the front end that we can utilize to craft queries and then send them across. At the server side, you'll have databases like Oracle, MySQL, MS SQL, and so on and so forth that will then execute those queries, right? So just to give you an example, if I use a tool called Postman, what we generally do when we craft a query is we send out a GET request to the website, and then we receive a response from the site with the HTML code and everything. So this is a tool that is utilized by software testers to test the responses that you're going to get from various websites. So on the left hand side, you can see I've used it on quite a bit. Here we have an example for gmail.com. So let's continue with that. So this is a GET request being sent to Gmail. The moment I send it, it's going to create an HTTP request and send it across. The response that I get is this. This is the HTML code for gmail.com, right? These are the cookies. These are the headers that include information. So you can see this is a text HTML character set utilized is UTF-8, and the configuration that has been done with the application, right? So this is where everything comes in. This is the cookie that has been sent with that particular request that I had sent out. Now, if you analyze this query, right? So when we went on to this application and I typed in that single quote and we generated this error, right? You can see that the application converted this into a SQL query. So the query was select username from accounts, where the username in quotes, single quotes, and we use this quote, right? The single quote right there. So that's where we use that operator, and that's where the exception error occurred. So these are the kind of queries that are structured by the application and then taken on to the database for execution. When we type in, it is a HTTP GET request with the username and password within that query that is sent to the application. The application converts it into a SQL query, sends it to the database, and the database responds with the appropriate response. So how do we prevent SQL injection in the first place? Use prepared statements and parameterized queries. These statements make sure that the parameters passed into SQL statements are treated in a safe manner. So for example, we saw that the single quote was an operator. This shouldn't be allowed to be utilized in the first place, right? So here, what we are doing here is a secure way of running a SQL query in the JDBC using a parameterized statement. Define which user we want to find. So there's a string, the email comes in. Connection to the database. We are going to figure out how the connection is going to be passed, how it is going to be created. Construct the SQL statement we want to run specifying the parameter, right? So we define how is it going to be created, what is going to be created, what can be passed to the database and what should not be passed to the database. So that is one way of utilizing prepared statements and parameterized queries. Then we have object relational mapping. Most development teams prefer to use object relational mapping frameworks to make the translation of SQL results set into code objects more seamless. So this is an example of object relational mapping where we map certain objects and allow that to be executed. And then escaping inputs. It is a simple way to protect against most SQL injection attacks. Many languages have standard functions to achieve this, right? So you need to be very careful while using escape characters in your code base when a SQL statement is constructed. Not all injection attacks rely on abuse of code characters. So you need to know what characters are being utilized in the configuration that you have created, in the structure that you have created, in the code that you have created. Which characters are being recognized as operators. You need to sanitize those operators, and you need to basically ensure that these operators cannot be accepted as user input. If they are, they're weeded out by the application and they never reach the database. Other methods of preventing SQL injection are password hashing, so that passwords cannot be bypassed, the passwords cannot be recovered, passwords cannot be cracked. Third-party authentication. You use OAuth or some other service for a single sign-on mechanism. Thus, you rely on a third party to maintain the security of authentication and what kind of parameters are passed. For example, using LinkedIn logins or Facebook logins, right? For the layman, you normally go onto Facebook and you allow, if you're using a game, right? If you start playing a game, you're allowed to log into the game using your Facebook credentials or your Google credentials. Now that is not just for ease of use, but the game user, the developer, has outsourced the authentication mechanisms to third parties such as Facebook or Google, because they understand that that authentication mechanism is as safe as can be. Facebook and Google are wealthy organizations, hire a lot of security experts, and the development for their authentication mechanisms is top notch. A small organization cannot spend that kind of money on security itself, right? So you use a third party authentication mechanism to ensure that these kind of attacks may not happen. Then web application firewalls. Having a web application firewall and configuring it properly for SQL injection attacks is one of the sure shot method of mitigating or minimizing the threat in the first place. So at this point in time, you have realized that the application has some vulnerabilities for SQL injection, and instead of recoding or restructuring the application, you want to take the easier way out or the cheaper way out. So what you do is you install a web application firewall and you configure the web application firewall to identify malicious queries and stop them at the firewall level itself, so they never reach the application, and thus the vulnerabilities on the application don't get executed. Buy better software and keep on updating the software. So it's not necessary that once you have a software, you install it, it's going to be safe for life. New vulnerabilities are discovered every day, every hour, and it may so happen what is secure today may be completely insecure tomorrow or the day after, right? So you need to keep on upgrading the software. If there are no upgrades available and the vulnerability still exists, you might want to migrate to a better software and thus ensure that you don't get hacked, right? Always update and use patches. Organizations keep on sending out updates and patches as and when they are released. You need to install them to enhance your security postures. And then continuously monitor SQL statements and databases. Use protocol monitors, use different softwares, use the firewalls
to keep on monitoring what kind of queries you're getting, and based on those queries, you want to ensure the inputs and the queries that are creating are not detrimental to the health of the software that you have.
So let's start looking at the certifications. So to be an ethical hacker, you must hold a certification which specializes in ethical hacking or in cybersecurity. Companies look for candidates who are globally certified. When we say globally certified, they're looking for a certificate that has been given by an organization that is recognized globally and is well accepted in the industry. So these are the top 5 certifications a candidate can obtain. The first one, become a certified ethical hacker. Then there is Global Information Assurance Certification Penetration Tester. Then Offensive Security Certified Professional, CompTIA Pen Test Plus. And finally, the Licensed Penetration Tester. Now, these certifications are offered by different organizations. All of these organizations are recognized globally and their certifications are well accepted in the technical space. So let's start off with the Certified Ethical Hacker, and we'll look at the organizations that provide these certifications and how we can attain them. So CEH, or Certified Ethical Hacker, in its current form is in its version 10. It's been revised and updated over a period of time. EC Council is the certifying authority for CEH. They have their own authorized training centers through which you can attend trainings, give those exams, get yourself certified, and thus become globally certified and can be eligible to apply for security related jobs. It is a very well-known certification and is widely accepted at the same time. It would test the candidate's knowledge of security threats and preventive measures. Now, there are 2 types of exams that you can give with CEH. One is a multiple choice question exam, which is theoretical in nature. They ask you questions and you answer the correct one. You select the correct answers. If you clear, you get certified. The second certification nowadays is where there's a practical exam associated with it. That's you'll have to purchase the voucher for that exam and give that exam. The practical exam is held in a virtual lab where you're given scenarios, and based on those scenarios, you have to resolve the questions given to you and give proof of the resolution, which would then get you certified as an ethical hacker. The theoretical exam in this scenario is the fees is around $500. This is for the multiple choice question exam where you can pay the fees and you can attend through a online portal and you can give the exam directly. The exam is 4 hours long, in which you have to answer 125 questions. Now 4 hours for 125 questions seems a long time, but it isn't. It's a very technical exam. There are scenario based questions and it would take some time for you to analyze and understand the question and then identify the equivalent correct answer. So it's a very competitive exam and you'll have to study really hard to clear this exam as well. The cutoff for passing varies from 60 to 85%. So there is no exact grade and all the questions have different weightages. So depending on the questions that have been given to you and the way that you have answered them, you would pass at either 60% or you would pass when you've scored 85%. Once you are CEH certified, which is a very technical certification, you will be qualified to apply for job roles as a penetration tester or a security engineer. These are job roles where you would be responsible of ethically trying to attack applications, servers, switches, and try to find out vulnerabilities within them. The training of this certification will make you adept in most of these tools that are required. There are a lot of practicals in this trainings, and if you successfully completed those practicals, clearing the exam is a easy task. With the practicals comes your knowledge and would help you understand how you would be performing penetration tests in the real world. An average annual salary in the USA for a CEH certified person is around $91,000 and in India is around 4,76,000 odd rupees. The salaries would vary as far as organizations are concerned. More established organizations can afford to pay a little bit more, but these are average salaries that we have seen across the market. The next certification is the GPEN, also known as the Global Information Assurance Certification Penetration Tester. This certification looks into the different pen testing practices and methods, also focuses on the various problems and pen testing. So again, this is where you're getting certified as a penetration tester. So it's again a technical certification where your knowledge on networking, applications, and security of which will be tested. You will be trained on this, of course. So the training will include all these areas where you need to focus, identify those problems, and thus be ready for the real world scenarios. The candidate will have to understand networking concepts and operating systems such as Linux and Windows, and you should be very well aware of the TCP/IP protocols. This is true for any of the technical certifications for ethical hacking. GIAC is the certification provider. It's again a very well-renowned and well-accepted certification authority across the globe. The exam fees are $1,899. 82 to 115 questions to be answered in 3 hours. Now, why 82 to 115? It depends on the test that has been associated, and depending on how you're answering those questions, you would be given those many number of questions to begin with. But all of these need to be answered in 3 hours. 74% is the pass percentage that is required to clear this exam. The average annual salary in the USA is around $96,000, while in India it is around similar to certified ethical hacking. Then looking at the next certification from Offensive Security called the OSCP, Offensive Security Certified Professional. This is another penetration testing certification, highly technical in nature, and it is an entirely hands-on certification. The previous two certifications that we saw, we talked about CEH, where there are two different exams. You could either take the theoretical exam and give your MCQs, or you could take the practical one. Here you don't have an option. This is a practical exam. So the test is conducted on a virtual network. So they send out instructions to you. There's a virtual lab that is given out to you, and they give you the questions, and you have to perform those assessments, create those reports, and provide it to the certifying authority, in this case Offensive Security. If you match their criteria of whatever you have identified in those reports, you get certified. Here, the requirements of good understanding of networking protocols, how systems function, how Kali Linux operating system functions, and the candidate must complete Offensive Security's penetration testing with the Kali Linux course and pass the hands-on exam. So this focuses purely on Kali Linux. Kali Linux is an operating system that is freely distributed over the internet and comes structured with around 300 plus tools used for ethical hacking. So this course totally relies on Kali Linux for you to use as a tool set for penetration testing. The certificate provider, as stated, is Offensive Security. The name of the course is OSCP, Offensive Security Certified Professional. Exam is around $800 to $1,550. Now understand that this exam is technical and is hands-on. So for you to prepare for this exam, they come up with virtual labs where you can start practicing and honing your skills. Depending on the number of days for which you have purchased the access to that particular labs, the amount will vary from $800, which would be the minimum access days available, to $1,550, where the maximum number of days would be given to you for practicing. Once you're ready, even during the time span of where you have that access, once you're ready for the exam, you can attempt the exam and clear. The average annual salary is similar, around $91,000 for the US market and 905,000 rupees in the Indian market. Then looking at the CompTIA Pen Test Plus. CompTIA is another certification authority or a certification provider, a training provider that will help you get yourself certified in the ethical hacking space. So they have certification called Pen Test Plus, which is focused towards penetration testing. So it is an intermediate level certification. It assesses the vulnerability assessment and the penetration testing skills of a candidate. Here, the training will provide you with all the essentials, where it will help you identify how to do vulnerability assessments, how to identify those vulnerabilities, and then which tools to utilize for what kind of a penetration test. For the requirements, a minimum of 3 to 4 years of hands-on experience in the information security field. Also, a CompTIA Security Plus or a Network Plus or equivalent knowledge is required. So in the Network Plus, they talk about securing networks, and they help you understand the OSI layers, the TCP/IP layers, and help you understand the protocols and all of those things. So having that knowledge is an added advantage. The certificate provider is CompTIA, and the cost of the exam is around $349. Maximum number of questions is 85, and I think it's a 3-hour exam. The passing percentage is scoring 750 marks out of a possible 900. So the scale is the minimum you can ever score is 100. If you're completely unprepared, the maximum you can score is 900. You get a leeway of 150 marks for your certifications. So you have to score a minimum of 750 to clear the exam. Average annual salary for a CompTIA certified penetration test plus professional is $97,000 in the US market, and in the Indian market it would be around 5 lakh rupees. Then comes the licensed penetration tester. Now this is an advanced certificate again from EC Council. This is where EC Council gives you a license which certifies that you have undergone thorough training and have cleared your exam in which you can conduct or lead an audit for vulnerability assessment and penetration testing. It is an expert level certification, comes after the CEH certification. It is the ultimate test which tests the candidate's penetration testing skills. So there are two certifications over here. One is the ECSA, EC Council Certified Security Analyst. Once you clear that, you can appear for the licensed penetration tester. Both of these are hands-on certifications. So you will be given a virtual lab, you will be given a scenario in which you'll have to perform some assessments, create reports, submit it to the EC Council. They will analyze your reports. If they meet the criteria that have been identified, you would then be certified as a licensed penetration tester. The candidate must be above 18 years of age. A recertification is required every 3 years. So the validity is 3 years. After 3 years, you will have to be recertified, or there is a continuing point education system over there where you can score points by publishing articles, by attending trainings or giving out trainings, and you can get yourself recertified. It is preferred that the candidate has CEH and the ECSA certification. So the previous certification that we saw, Certified Ethical Hacker, and then the ECSA, EC Council Certified Security Analyst, after which you can appear for the LPT, Licensed Penetration Tester. The certificate provider again is EC Council. The Licensed Penetration Tester exam has a different candidate must purchase an exam dashboard for $899, which is valid for a year. So once you purchase the voucher, the validity is 1 year. You can prepare with it and attain the certification. Only once you're ready, the exam can be scheduled and you can give that exam. The exam consists of 3 different levels. Each level has 3 different challenges. The candidate must pass at least 1 challenge in order to qualify for the next level. And for each level, the exam hours. So this is a grueling exam, hands-on. They're giving you challenges and they are going to test you on your skills as a penetration. So be ready to be very hands-on for this kind of a certification. Average annual salary and up.
To the networks, programs, computer systems, and their components from unauthorized digital access and attacks. Did you know that according to the universe, attack every 39 seconds? That is on an average 2,244 times a day? Now that's a huge number.